This is the special Board of Education meeting. We're in open session. It's Monday, May 1st, 2017. So I'd like to get started. We have a very important topic on the agenda today. Looking forward to some very enthusiastic discussion. And so we'll see where the discussion and the conversation takes us today. So first item on the agenda is public appearances. And we do have a few speakers. And I'd just like to remind everyone that speaking is 3 minutes. So please try to stay within your allotted time. And we'll start off speaking this evening with Doug Keeler. And Doug will be followed by Katie Barr. Doug, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening.
Green light.
Green light.
No, there you go.
Testing. All right. 3 minutes starts now, right?
Starts now.
I'm resetting for you, Doug.
Thank you very much. I'm here to speak on behalf of MTI in support of the recommendation to transition to 2 HMO offerings, Dean and GHC. This recommendation was a result of many hours of analysis and discussion with district administration and many more hours of discussion and debate among MTI's elected member leaders for the past 3 months. We believe this recommendation is the best available option to ensure that district employees have a continued choice of 2 high-quality health plans while also distributing benefit savings to provide much-needed salary increases. As you all know, many current employees have not received a measurable pay increase since 2009. Most have yet to recoup the loss of take-home pay associated with increased pension and benefit costs. The possibility of a state-mandated 12% premium contribution would complicate things further, particularly for the lowest-paid district employees. We believe that the benefit savings from a transition to 2 HMOs is needed to fund salary increases for all district employees. That said, we also continue to have concerns for those employees currently covered by Unity who have established meaningful relationships with their current doctors and are understandably reluctant to give those up. For those individuals, we understand from our discussions with the district that they're going to have options of transition of care options. There's going to be a POS, point of service option, available to allow them to visit non-network providers subject to somewhat higher cost. And we think critical to that option is making sure that those somewhat higher costs are affordable costs. That is a practical option for people who need to have that option. So we strongly urge the district and the carriers to work to make sure that there are affordable options for people for that point of service option. A reasonable transition timeline is also necessary. I think we all understand that in order to provide employees with the time they need and the information they need in order to select the best plan for them and their families. We've talked with the benefits department. We've seen their plan. We understand they have a plan in place to start that transition. They believe they have time to do that right, and we know that that needs to be the case. It needs to be done right. It needs to be done with as minimal stress as possible and as much opportunity for people to get questions answered to make the right decision. So while we support this recommendation to transition to the 2 insurance providers, we also sit here fully aware that employee morale is low, and it suffers further when employees view these changes negatively. Now, we believe the salary increases made possible will be valued by people. We also recognize that many of those people with Unity will also view this as a loss. Let's not return here next year with similar considerations. We remain optimistic that this Board of Education, working with administration in collaboration with district employees and employee reps, can build the sort of schools where employees and students thrive. And MTI members have many ideas about this, which we look forward to sharing with you in the months ahead. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Katie, followed by Michelle.
Hi, my name's Katie Ladenbar. My husband Josh is a custodian at Crestwood, otherwise he would be here himself. This is Izzy, my daughter. I also sent an email to the board members regarding this little child. She has a complex heart defect, and we have Unity. So losing our UW Health providers would be a pretty big deal for this kiddo. I understand she could still see specialists if she goes to GHC, But I come from a background in healthcare and believe in collaborative care and coordinated care between primary care offices and specialty care offices. I think that's easier to do when you're within the same healthcare organization. I also have concerns about Dean and GHC providers being able to absorb the volume of patients that our school district has with Unity right now. I have concerns about the access issues that this kind of proposal would cause and the way that would in fact impact employees, especially those with complex health issues. So I hope you will take that into consideration when you are choosing to go to the two-plan option, that kiddos like this are the ones who are going to be impacted. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle?
Good evening. I've been with MMSD for 20 years. I'm a special education teacher in one of the district's most challenging schools. I'm also bilingual. I'm the only special ed teacher in my school who is bilingual, even though half of my school is a DLI program. For 20 years, I've accepted minimal salary increases in order to keep good health insurance. Many years ago, I developed a serious health problem. My GHC doctors couldn't figure it out. My dean doctors could not figure it out. I had regular blood transfusions. My doctors told me that I was in danger of organ failure. Once Unity became an option, I saw a UW physician. Within 10 minutes, she figured out exactly what was going on with me. With her continual care over the years, I'm recovering and I'm living an active and normal life. I have not had a blood transfusion since the week I first met my primary UW doctor. Today, most of you will vote to take that doctor away from me, the doctor that I love and trust, the doctor that saved my life, unless, of course, I can pay the approximately $3,500 annually for the POS option. In exchange for taking away my doctor, you might give me a raise. For a veteran teacher like me, that raise is now estimated to be 1.7%. Apparently, the goal of all of this is to save $3 million. And apparently taking away my doctor is the only option most of you can come up with. As most of you know, I'm also on the Dane County Board, and through my work on the board, I know that balancing a budget on the backs of employees is not the only option. I do realize there's a time constraint with this issue, but also from my work on the county board, I know that a budget can be reworked in a matter of hours if people are present that are willing to think outside the box. It takes concentrated effort, but it is far from impossible. I see with this that there are two possible solutions. One, negotiate with Unity so that they bring their costs down. And two, find other areas of the budget to cut, areas that do not affect employee benefits. The first areas that come to my mind for cutting are renting spaces like the Sheraton for meetings and also sending 6 Doyle staff to a professional development where there are 8 teachers present. Delaying this vote tonight would allow for these options to be explored. Earlier today, I read in my school newsletter that I'm invited to a meeting on May 19th to complete enrollment forms for my new healthcare provider. When questioned about this, Ms. Cheatham informed me that Doyle staff solidified a plan for each school just in case the vote passed. I wish that I had time in my day to put so much effort into something that just might happen. I realize that this is a done deal. The message was mandated and the votes were counted weeks ago. One of you was brave enough to offer an alternative. I'm devastated. Happy May Day.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our public speakers speaking for.
It was after 5 o'clock, so it's your decision.
Okay, Mandy.
Good evening. Sorry. Good evening. My name is Mandy Malloy. I am a teacher for Madison Metropolitan School District, and I am a avid supporter of MTI. And I also would really want, it would be wonderful to keep Unity. After all these women or people who have spoken on behalf of Unity, I think it's vital that we have a relationship with our physicians, with our nurses, with the staff of Unity. My family relies on that. I have 2 beautiful children behind me, And let me tell you, it is a gift when we can go to the doctor and them not screaming and crying behind me saying that they don't want to go. Our family physician, he is amazing. And because of the possible budget cuts and losing Unity, I will not have him as our doctor. And I've had him as long as we've been in Wisconsin, which has been 8 years. And that has just been a real gift. So I encourage you, as the board members and the community members and the listeners of tonight's meeting, to really take those relationships very seriously, because we do. Relationships, as you know, as being part of the community and teachers, are vital for our own students and our own kids. And when Nikki, I saw your email on the MTI Facebook website, and I emailed all of y'all last night in regards to that, and I'm willing to hear alternative measures that we can keep Unity. I think it's a necessity and really important for all of us to kind of come to the table again. And I realize we've done that weeks ago and we continue to talk about this, but continue to come to the table and listen and work it out and listen and work it out. So that's all I had to say. Thank you for your time. Have a great night.
Okay, now that concludes our public speaking for tonight. And so we'll move right into the main part of the meeting, and that is the discussion around healthcare benefits. So, Jen, would you like to take us away?
Yeah, thanks, James. I'd like for...
Can I do recusals before?
Sure, go right ahead.
I think that's what the new policy says it has to happen. New board policy and following old practices is that board members announce their recusals and why they're recusing them. My wife is employed as a special education assistant with the Madison Metropolitan School District. We receive our health care through MMSD, and therefore I will be recusing myself from the portion of the meeting discussing the choices of how many providers we have. There are other, if that decision is made, I will not be recusing from the discussions of how that money will be allocated, which would be later in the meeting. So just announcing that.
Similar to TJ for the same parts of the discussion, I'll also be recusing myself. My husband is a bilingual resource teacher for the school district.
All right, thank you. Jen, you can now take us away.
All right, thanks. I would like to invite Mike, Barry, Deirdre, and Rochelle to join me. They're going to help. We want to say a few words before we open it up for the board's discussion. As you know, our special meeting tonight is focused on one particular aspect of our budget proposal, which includes the recommendation to go from a 3 HMO model to a 2 HMO model, and to use the savings to further increase salary and wages and to fund a couple of targeted compensation strategies. It's unusual to ask for early permission, but we feel the need to do so that we can get the ball rolling and ensure a smooth transition. I do want everyone to know, and in particular some of the speakers tonight and those who have emailed me and other board members, that we know that nothing about this has been easy or is easy. Changing health insurance plans is personal. My own family is on Unity. We ourselves have some complicated health issues and histories. If the proposal passes, we'll be experiencing the same transition process that our employees are. I also want to acknowledge, and Doug spoke to this a little bit, we've been working with M3, our 3 HMOs, our union partners, all the way through, which means really for the last couple of years we've been having discussions about health insurance, how to make it affordable, how to offer high quality health insurance for our staff as part of their compensation package. Of course, since January, prompted largely by the governor's budget proposal, we have entered into that conversation with a new kind of urgency. As you know, the governor's proposal requires a 12% employee premium contribution in order to receive new state funding, which our students and staff need. We, of course, believe that that proposal is unnecessary. It removes local control. We continue to make sure our voice is heard. But assuming that it's possible that this proposal passes, we also have needed to plan. We think that the proposal we've put on the table is strong. We've worked incredibly hard to answer every possible question that has come our way and to analyze this from every possible angle since we first presented the proposal in March. And I just want to highlight a few of those things as a reminder. If the 12% goes through, we intend to redistribute all of those savings back into salary and wages, which we hope points to the value of our staff and their compensation, and it is not typical of school districts. In addition, we plan to use the savings from the 3 to 2 HMO plan to provide additional salary increases. That's on top of steps and lanes and base wage to the max and some additional compensation. Which actually means the vast majority of our staff will see increases in salary this year, despite the 12%. And no one will go negative because of the one-time stipend that will be given to that small number of employees. It helps us move forward immediately with a couple of targeted compensation strategies that we've wanted to accomplish for a long time. And I think most importantly, I want the board to know it does not preclude you from doing more on compensation later down the line. The board votes on the full budget at the end of June. And there's a lot of careful deliberation that needs to happen between now and then. And that is consistent with the way the board has acted in previous years. So with that said, I'm going to let Deirdre say a little bit more about the proposal, and then what we want to do is answer some of the questions that have come up in the last 48 hours.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So as Jen stated, our team has been working on this health insurance proposal for the board for quite a few months. Our recommendation, which was shared at last week's regular board meeting and in a follow-up memo, is that the board approves transitioning to a 2 HMO model effective July 1 of 2017. And this option carries or captures $3 million in health insurance premiums that will be reinvested into employee compensation. The insurance plan would include GHC and Dean as the 2 providers, with no plan design changes, and again, an implementation date of July 1. The savings would go towards an across-the-board salary lift for employees at a cost of a little bit more than $1.7 million, because we want to remain competitive and retain our current staff. It also includes increasing the summer school hourly rate to $25 per hour, because we know that summer school is a critical intervention for our students, many who are students of color, and we certainly want to increase the likelihood that they'll have access to our high-quality teaching staff. And then finally, we want to increase beginning teacher salaries to about $41,000, because we want to be sure to attract the best teachers for our district. And as Jen stated, there have been a few questions that have come in from the board in the last few days, and we want to be sure to address those before we open it up for discussion. So to start off, Mike's going to give us some additional insight into our financial position, and then Rochelle is going to walk us through timing of the switch and the support that would be provided during the transition of care. So I'll turn it over to Mike.
Okay, thanks. So you might think that having produced a 185-page budget proposal that you've received all we have to print or say about next year's budget, and that's almost true. We did prepare one additional worksheet specifically for tonight's meeting to put this health insurance and compensation discussion into a larger budgetary context. The worksheet, this one-pager, in case you were interested and didn't realize that we'd be presenting this, there are copies on the table outside. There's also some copies over here. I believe the board already has copies of this document. So let me walk through this, and hopefully, again, I won't be addressing health insurance directly, but rather addressing the overall financial situation. Hopefully this will, lead to a more informed and productive discussion when we get to that point. So here we go. The sheet that you have before you is divided into sources and uses for next year's budget. And I'll try to walk through it, and I'll point out what I think are the key points along the way. The original budget, starting up on line 1 of sources, for this year's budget, started out at negative $1.6 million. That's the budget that the board approved last June. It was the preliminary budget for this year, negative $1.6 million. And then line 2 In November, the community supported a referendum for additional funding for the school district that allowed us to add $5 million of revenue to the current year budget on the tax levy. And that flipped the budget from negative 1.6 million to positive 3.4 million. And we still ended up with a reasonably good tax rate, or tax levy increase. It was just 2.1%, as you might recall. Anyway, that $3.4 million position that we're in for this year's budget becomes the springboard, or if you will, the opening position for next year's budget. And that's good, because we start out next year $3.4 million to the good, right? Then, the referendum from November of 16 allows us to add $5 million of additional revenue next year. That brings us to $8.4 million of total sources, if you will, for next year. It's possible that the state per pupil funding for next year could be $200 per pupil, in which case they would add $5.5 million to next year's budget, bringing the total sources available to $13.9 million. I need to point out here, and this is really critical, that that number is not guaranteed. It is simply a number that the governor put out in his February budget preview. And it is tentative. Excuse the typo on tentative. We couldn't afford the extra vowel there, so we abbreviated it. That number will become more solid around July 1, when the state budget is typically published. So it's in the budget, but it's not solid. And then finally, line 5, all other required revenue adjustments. We had to lower our expectations around Medicaid, around E-rate, and some other state and federal sources. We walked that back about $1.8 million. And with all those actions, our total sources for next year come to $12.1 million. And that is a positive position, especially relative to some of the budgets we've dealt with in recent years, and it's positive mostly due to the support of the community. So that's part 1. Part 2, the uses of those budget dollars. So let's walk uses, meaning the expenditure line items in the budget. The first one are the priority actions, page 25 of your budget proposal. It's at $3.2 million. And obviously, there's a list of several items there. Secondly, what we called final actions. We presented this at the April operations work group meeting. $1.5 million. It consisted of the $400,000 needed to adopt the livable wage, $15 an hour standard, which is a high priority across Dane County. Also, $500,000 staffing reserve. This is intended to give some flexibility around classroom size adjustments. K-1 originally, but really primary altogether. That's there. And then lastly, $600,000 was a priority action originally aimed at family engagement, and we later kind of stepped it back to just a priority action reserve, if you will. Those actions account for $1.5 million. So we've basically committed $4.7 million so far, if you're following along. Now, the basic compensation package, steps, lanes, base wage, $3.7 million, at least as to this general fund presentation. That means we've used $8.4 million. The required budget allowances, contracts and things like that, $1.7 million, meaning we've committed $10.1 million in expenditures. And then finally, line 5, because we were unsure of state funding and didn't want to spend money that we might not get, we put in a placeholder, a reserve of $2 million relative to that state budget uncertainty. Essentially, this $2 million is a hedge. If we do receive $200 per pupil, we don't need this hedge. But if we don't receive it, let's say we receive $125 per pupil, we're going to have to make an adjustment to this budget. We're going to take $2 million out of the revenue side and $2 million out of the expenditure side. And that's what this is here to protect us against. Okay? I should also mention 2 other things. It's May 1st. The board has yet to get into serious budget, post-presentation budget discussions, and a post-presentation pre-adoption budget deliberations. We have a long way to go, and a lot of topics will come up. And we think it's important to not overcommit our budget resources on May 1. And then lastly, we have tax levy management. When we did the referendum in November, we told the community that we thought we could hold this year's tax levy to 4%, no more than 4%, if the referendum were approved. We feel it's really important to deliver on that, and almost sort of obligation on our part. If we put that number out there, we want to make sure that we can live with it, and we have to be careful. If we spend to the max and levy to the max, and then lose state aid to the max, we could put ourselves in a tough situation come October. So those are my disclaimers around the expenditure side of this budget. Below the line, there's a line that divides this presentation. There are two major reallocation recommendations in this budget. The first has to do with the governor's proposed, but not official, 12% employee premium contribution. As Jen said, we did not welcome this proposal. If it were to occur, it has a significant and very disparate impact on our employees. The most immediate impact is that in aggregate, the employees' share of health insurance in this district increases by $4.5 million. It's right out of take-home pay, which is one of the reasons we didn't like the proposal to begin with. Our strategy is to take that $4.5 million, recognizing that the employer's share of health insurance goes down by $4.5 million. Right? We would simply reverse the effect and bring everybody back to where they were in aggregate. So $4.5 million gets redistributed dollar for dollar back into employee compensation. We think it's the right thing to do. This is one of these sort of State Budget Act 10 ideas that tells you what you can do. It doesn't necessarily tell you what you should do. Our recommendation is to offset the negative impact on employees. The second reallocation action is on health insurance. Our proposal, as you know, is to move from a 3 HMO model to a 2 HMO model, capture the savings, and reallocate it back into wages and salaries. The first of those three uses of those funds is an across-the-board $1.74 million increase to wages and salaries. As was pointed out during citizen comments, that goes a long way towards offsetting any of the more severe impacts of the 12% employee premium contribution over and above the $4.5 million that we're rerouting. Also, summer school and beginning pay are in that equation as well, which Deirdre has already explained. So hopefully this financial context will lend some value to the discussion to follow. And I'll pause here if there are any questions. If there are not, I'll turn it over to Rochelle to talk about implementation planning and concepts like that.
I don't have a question for you, Mike, but I do want to chime in on something that you said as it relates to the $2 million hedge. I was at the Dane County Superintendent's meeting. We meet once a month to talk about a variety of things, but often to just share notes on what's happening in our respective districts. At our last meeting, we talked about budget and about the state proposal in particular, and there was no superintendent around that table that is planning their expenditures at $200 per pupil. Everyone is being careful to create some sort of flexibility in their budget. It's the responsible thing to do. I just wanted to punctuate what Mike is saying. We think not only is it responsible, but we want to be able to provide the board the kind of flexibility it needs to manage around additional possible priority actions or changes to those actions, to manage around the tax levy, and to manage around any thoughts on additional compensation. So Just want to put that out there. It's about a hedge, and it's about creating flexibility for the board to make strong, smart decisions in the coming months. Okay. Any other? I'll give it back to James before we move on to Rochelle.
Oh, thank you. Continue, please.
All right, so
You have a question, Dean?
First of all, thanks for the work, and particularly with joining with the MTI staff and over the months of discussion on this. That's always, we're always glad to hear that that happens. I would like to hear a couple things around the POS issue. Before I ask the questions, I also want to reemphasize that we're just considering the healthcare plan today, not the full budget. So we have time to play with this budget, not just, we're going to, because that leads to my questions. I heard that the $3,500 figure for someone that might want to continue with Unity if we follow through on this plan. Is that over and above their 12% contribution?
Before that's answered, Rochelle is going to go over all the POS stuff. So my question for you, is it okay if she does her presentation, then get to your question? Because that's really her
Okay.
section of the meeting.
Fine.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the process and procedure built into the change. And the first thing I really want to talk about is how does that timing of the change work? And we're going to break it into two buckets. We're going to first talk about the cost of the change and also about the transition to the new plan. So the first piece is we're going to focus on the cost. As you know, we recommend changing to a 2 HMO plan as of July 1st, which allows us to capture the greatest amount of savings, approximately $3 million, and reinvest it into 3 buckets: beginning teacher salary, summer school, and across the board salary and wages. If we push that off by a month or 2 months, it impacts our savings. It can impact our savings as much as $517,000 per month for each additional month that we continue under that 3 HMO plan, because the cost of that 3 HMO plan is significantly greater than that 2 HMO plan. Our savings is eaten up quite quickly if we push it off. The other part is that transitioning piece. We have to kind of think backwards on how we're going to do this effectively. If we look at a July 1st start date, we have to look about the processing time behind the scenes. The insurance carriers need a solid month to take the applications and enter them into the systems and get people their cards and get that information out to the doctors so that employees and members can start using their plan on July 1st, which leaves us the month of May to educate, communicate, and collect those enrollment forms. That's where this timing is critical on having a solid communication plan. If we were to push it out to August or September, we would still need to do that education in May because our employees are gone during the summer. We lose our ability to interact with those employees while they're still in school. It's harder to communicate over the summer months. And so those are 2 reasons why a July 1st date seems to still work within our time frame. Additionally, if we look at when school starts, that's a very exciting time of the year, and we want to focus on that smooth transition of school starting rather than having 1,000 employees having new insurance. So that's another piece of the puzzle that we just want to think through on a different start date. Which brings to the question, can we do it effectively? Is July 1st an effective date? And yes, it is. I want to reiterate that we can and will do it effectively on July 1st. We have 29 group meetings that can occur in the month of May so that employees can attend group meetings. We have hundreds and hundreds of individual meetings that can occur during this time where employees can meet with the carriers individually to start that transition of care. We have a benefits team that will be going out to all 50 schools if we go live on July 1st, where they can meet with employees and answer their questions. We have extended customer service hours. We will have front desk and benefits help desk support from 7 in the morning until 5:30 in the afternoon to be able to answer walk-in questions and phone calls. We will have a website that is ready to go live with all of the information employees need to get their questions answered. And we will have individualized communication materials to ensure that every impacted employee has the information they need and the resources available to be able to make a determination and switch to GHC or Dean. Additionally, we are going to be flexible in the communication process. If we find that there are needs that are not being met, we will make all effort in meeting those needs. If that includes extending meetings or having additional one-on-ones or answering additional questions, we will do that if the need arises. So then the last piece is really talking about how that transition works for the individual. Members will have the opportunity to meet with the Dean and GHC representatives to start that transition early. We can have meetings available as early as May 3rd for employees to be able to meet with the representatives. Employees would need to come with some simple medical information. They would need to bring some of their history, and they would have to have a list of their doctors to start that process. The carriers would then take it back and start an individualized transition plan for that member. They will work with their doctors and a care management team to carefully transition them to the new plan. Members would be able to make doctor's appointments prior to July 1st to ensure that they can see their doctors on July 1st. Members will have their cards before that date, so they will have all of the information needed for July 1st. Additionally, I want to reiterate that the carriers have the capacity to take on members. Employees can see doctors on July 1st. GHC and Dean have confirmed with us that people can get in quickly and easily for care. That can be care with a primary care doctor, that could be care for a physical, that could be care for emergency room or urgent care. All of those are available on July 1st. And then the last piece is I just want to talk a little bit about this transition. This is all about a mid-year change. We also have the opportunity and have provided in the past open enrollment for a January 1st change. If an employee makes an election and they don't feel comfortable with the change that they have made, they have every availability to change their plan in the fall for a January 1st change date. They could move from Dean to GHC or vice versa. They could move from the HMO to the point of service or back. Or they could go from single to family or family to single, whatever meets their needs. And with that, I think I will turn it back to Deirdre and Mike or open it up for questions.
The point of service.
Oh, yes. Yep. And the point of service plan is set up very similar to the HMO plan. If you elect the point of service and you visit an in-network provider, you will get the same coverage as that HMO plan. The point of service rates are slightly higher on an employee paycheck, ranging from $1.50 to up to $60, depending on the employee unit that you have. So the per paycheck cost is minimal.
Excuse me, point of order, please. The way we're going to handle the meeting, and mostly all meetings, is that speaking will be done by show of hands first, and I recognize those. So, were you done?
Just a couple more seconds.
Please.
The other piece of the point of service plan is the out-of-network piece. Members can choose any provider of their choice and see that provider without needing referrals under that point of service plan. There are some costs built into it, though. There is a deductible. Members would have to pay the first $250 worth of services per person on that plan. And they would pay on top of that co-insurance. They pay a portion of those claims. But there is a guaranteed maximum built into that plan. Employees would not have tens of thousands of dollars worth of claims built in. We have built the max into $1,250 for single coverage and $2,500 for family coverage. That only applies to out-of-network services. And with that, we can use a flexible spending account through the school district so employees can save that money pre-tax to help offset their medical costs. And again, there's that choice. A member could elect the point of service plan now, and if they feel comfortable with that HMO plan, they can make that change on January 1st. We do have that flexibility built.
Okay, I would like to move right to questions unless you all have something else you want to add. Okay, Dean, Dean has the floor.
Yeah, that helped a little bit. So that 3,500 figure that was a potential, can you tell me if that is over and above the 12%, which that's what it sounds like it is?
It sounds like if you were to just look at the point of service costs, the maximum is $2,500 plus premiums. I can't picture a way to get to $3,500 at this point. We would need to individually look at that case to understand how that has been built and how those services would be built in.
So you think that could include the 12%?
It's possible. Okay. But with
well,
that
I'd like that fleshed out a little bit more as we go forward here. It just I would like to know if someone takes a POS that the increased cost to them would be affordable. And that's a word that doesn't mean much until you put a number to it. Affordable to someone who's at a six-figure salary as opposed to someone who's at 40 is much different. So that needs to, the affordability term needs to be applied up and down the wage scale. And so that's something that I wanted to get a little bit more detail. I don't know if you can get that from these people. I wish, I wish a lot of things, but I was hoping I could get a little bit more of that. The other thing, the pre-tax deduction, is that only for someone that is a PO? Doesn't that apply to all our staff?
it does apply
And it
to
applies
every
for more
person.
things than just healthcare too, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, so that's an option already in place that many people are using, aren't they?
We have minimal participation, but this is a great opportunity to increase that
Yeah.
participation.
Well, maybe people aren't quite aware of it yet, and they should be given more information, because that is a cost saver in a lot of ways.
Is it all right if Mike takes a shot at answering your question about point of service?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. We have employee premium contributions in this year's plan, and they are automatically run pre-tax through the 125, 129 plan. It's automatic. You don't even have to sign up for it. It's automatic. I think what Rochelle was talking about are people who would elect to.
Wait, tell me, is that, say that again, is that across the board for every employee?
Yes.
They get that, the healthcare copay now is pre-tax?
Pre-tax, that's right. The employee premium contributions are
so everyone's getting that
automatically
benefit.
pre-tax.
Okay.
Automatically. And that becomes even more important when you start moving up in, from 3 and 5%
Yeah.
up into 12, right? So that's a given. And then secondly, I too am not sure of a scenario I've seen where an employee could be out of pocket $3,500 on a point of service option. But we've run a number of examples and shared these back and forth with employee reps and so on. I'd love to see if I can construct one. We understand the principle you want to get at, which is that if you have a point of service plan, it needs to be a viable option. You said affordable. I realize those are soft terms. But we've had a point of service plan as an option, even now. If you don't want Dean, Unity, or GHC, you have a point of service option. But But it costs more. That makes sense. You're going out of network, essentially. We're paying retail. So it does cost more. I think what we're looking for is some proportionality in what it costs now versus what it would cost next year. And we will make sure that that happens. And we will follow up in writing on that.
Okay. One last question, I'll be done. Are you still discussing a 3-year contract?
With the
With the
HMOs?
carriers? I think that's what Michelle.
We have rate guarantees built in for, I believe, 2 years.
I'm sorry, didn't hear that.
We have rate guarantees built in for 2 years, not 3 years at this point. Usually what you see is the farther out you build in those rate guarantees or contracts, your premiums go up a little bit because they're taking on additional risk, not knowing what that long-term impact will be.
Okay, Nikki?
On the retirees, I know they have their own savings, the health insurance. Can they use any of their savings account to pay for like point of service?
Yes. Retirees have the ability to use their account for any district-provided plan.
So if they're not providing Unity, but it's point of service, that would still be allowed?
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Not on this, but I have a question in general.
You have the floor. I mean, if it's pertaining to the subject matter, yes, you have the floor.
I'd like to make a motion to amend.
Well, we don't have a motion on the floor yet.
I would like to make a motion to introduce one other possible plan, but I don't know the rules of order.
Okay, but that would be fine if following the discussion.
Thank you, I apologize, I'm still learning.
That's okay. There seems to be a lot of questions, a lot of confusion around. I think healthcare is one of the most difficult things for people to understand. I've had it all my life, and I'm not sure I understand it all. And, one of the questions people keep asking that we've seen is this thing about UW health providers. And they're saying, well, I'm going to lose my UW health provider. That's not true, is it? Or is it? I mean, how do you lose your UW health provider? Those that are seeing doctors at UW Health, can you give us a situation where they would lose them? And every situation I know of, you still have access to those doctors. So can you talk about the UW Health providers and how under any plan or switching plans that they would lose those health providers from UW?
Right. Let's talk first about the HMO plan. Under the HMO plan, under the GHC insurance carrier, you would have continued access to UW specialists. GHC focuses on primary care. So a member with Unity may have to change their primary care doctor to a GHC doctor, but would be able to continue their care with a specialist at UW. It could be a cardiologist, it could be an allergy, it could be carbone cancer, and even AmFam Children's Hospital. Those would all be considered specialty care. Under the point of service plan, it's even greater. You would not have to give up your primary care doctor under that point of service plan. You can continue to see that primary care doctor under that POS plan, but it would fall under the out-of-network piece. So the member would incur some out-of-pocket costs for those primary care visits.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask a little bit about the transition. It sounds like you guys have a lot planned in the next month to communicate to employees. I also know that you all have full-time jobs. Are you staffing up additional employees to make sure that this is, that people are always on hand to communicate? How are we literally doing that?
Yeah.
Because I don't think you guys have like 8 hours a day lying around to invest.
Sure we do. Yeah, so our staff will certainly, this is all hands on deck for us. So we've had very specific meetings and conversations. Everybody in the HR department is going to be trained and has been trained on the FAQs. So there's a first level that we want to be sure that if anybody contacts HR, that we can get their questions answered very quickly. But in addition to that, as far as the processing goes and the volume that's going to be coming in, we will certainly just add on limited term support to make sure that that happens.
And then in terms of the access question, I know we've heard concerns from folks in terms of just being, how are these HMOs going to absorb so many people, 1,000 of our staff, 4,000 covered members. Do we have any clauses built into our contract around their ability to absorb staff within a reasonable time frame? Is there anything protecting us in how we've structured that contract?
We have gotten written and verbal confirmation from the carriers that they can absorb them. The contract piece comes after this. Once this, or if this is approved, then we would move forward with a contract that we can build that in for performance guarantees.
Just, and you may have touched on it, but I want to touch on it again. The cases we've heard about individuals with really serious health conditions. Just can you talk about that just for another minute or so to make sure that we're clear on what happens with those individuals under any of the plans that we currently have with the serious health conditions in terms of the type of changes they may, if we were to adopt the two-carrier plan, what type of impact those individuals may have, if any.
Yeah, maybe I can give an example to help explain it a little further. Let's say we have a member who is stage 2 cancer, and they are receiving treatment at the Carbone Center. That's a specialized clinic at UW that they are receiving their round-the-clock care. They receive their chemo infusions there. They spend long weekends there. They end up in the emergency room when they have low blood counts. That is a very complex case, and GHC and Dean both will take care in transitioning that person. I think GHC might be the plan of their choice because they would have continued access to Carbone Clinic in that situation. That member would, we would strongly suggest that member have an individual one-on-one transition of care meeting as soon as possible to get the pre-approvals put in place. They would meet with that provider. They would say, I have cancer, I'm taking all of these prescriptions, I've got 15 upcoming doctor's appointments, and I'm treating at Carbone. GHC would take that back, and behind the scenes, they would reach out to that doctor at Carbone. They would get the pre-approvals set in place immediately before July 1st. So that employee would not lose any care during this transition. They could continue to go to Carbone on July 1st, no questions asked. They would be able to continue to see their oncologists, no questions asked. They would be able to continue to get their scans without any concerns. The one piece of caution is they would have to change their primary care doctor. But under this type of situation, they're most likely not seeing their primary care doctor. They are seeing specialists year-round. If they needed to make an appointment with a primary care doctor, they would need to choose a doctor that is in network, so it would go back to GHC. And that doctor would request their medical records from UW. So that doctor would gather all of the information, and they would do a thorough review of that person's history before they even had that first appointment. And so that the medical information is all there and readily at their hands. The relationship would be built from that point going forward. We could say the same for mental health. We could see the same for kiddos at American Family Children's Hospital. We could say the same for allergy and asthma. Those are all specialty visits that take place at UW that would automatically continue if that member goes through that transition of care process.
Thank you. Nikki?
What about, I do a lot of mental health work, and my question is, what about ER emergency commitment? Is that considered a specialist? Is that considered general coverage? How is that? Are they paying the ER rates? What rate would they be paying?
Under all plans, emergency room is considered in-network, all the time. So as a part of the emergency room visit, it would fall under in-network, and if they are committed after that point, there's usually specialty hospitals in the area that focus on that. And the insurance carriers work and know of those specialists, and behind the scenes, they put those referrals in so that it is.
And I have one other question. I'm not trying to drive you crazy, but I do know there's a shortage of beds often in mental health. What happens if it's an emergency situation and they don't have a choice but to go out of because there are no other beds and it's a mandatory 72 hours? And what happens?
Yeah. I'm trying to think through the scenarios because the current hospital cannot cover it. I would assume that falls under that referral process as well. I would say that is an accurate statement.
Okay, I want to just go back to Kate's point about the smooth transition, the contract guarantee. I just think that we're talking about health here and people's care, and we all have health care and providers that we've gotten used to and very comfortable with, we've had for years, and it is a difficult thing to change. You know, whether you have a serious condition or not, it's very difficult to change providers. And so I just want to encourage you, although I know that you all are doing all that you can to make sure this works smoothly, I do want to just encourage you to all that you can, if we were to go to this two carrier position, that we do all you can to make sure that we don't incur these kinds of difficulties. As a board, we really don't want to sit here 2 months from now and hear people coming back to us talking about all the issues of transition. I think if we have to go through that as a board, it's going to be a very difficult place to be. And if it's difficult for us, it's going to be difficult for you all. And
we don't want it to be difficult for anyone.
right. So let's make sure that we do everything we can, work very hard to make sure that if this is the route we take, that is really done with as much care and precision as possible. Mary?
I have a question on this handout with regards to the premiums. I'm just trying to understand the tables at the end. And the way I'm reading this is that the current Unity monthly premium at the 10% contribution level is $178.59 monthly. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. And then if I'm comparing it to the tables above that, which is the GHC monthly premium and if I use the 10%, so to make it equal, so it would be just the comparison between the two. For the POS, it's actually less than the current Unity HMO. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So that the person switching from Unity to the POS option under GHC, so they retain their same specialist, they're actually able to go out of network on their primary care physician, is actually paying no more cost. In fact, they're paying less than they currently pay.
That is correct.
So the only change then would be the possible for the out-of-pocket would be the up to $2,500.
Yes.
But in fact, you're paying less, and if you don't sign up for POS, basically you retain your specialist, but you change your primary care, your premium's going to go down by $40 a month.
That is correct.
Okay, any other questions? All right, because I'm going to move.
I guess I do have one, maybe to follow on your last question.
Okay, sure.
If I can, which is, does this group, depending on where this ends, have another opportunity in the next couple of months to get an update on the transition or see the contract?
We can get an update on transition every day if that's what we would like. So, yeah.
So, I mean, there's a contract to be negotiated, right? I mean,
Yes.
if we see that contract again, what does the process look like? And maybe that's...
Could anyone elaborate on just a minute or two on the process, the contractual process, I guess? What that looked like, whatever the process is.
Right. Go for it.
So if first I'll generalize. Usually what happens with at a board vote is that you authorize the staff level to act upon your action, and then at staff level we would enter into contract negotiations with the third party. When they're relatively straightforward, we do it ourselves. As they get more complex, we use in-house legal. And if they become very complex, we would use occasionally specialty legal. We negotiate that. It's ultimately reviewed by our legal, and it does not necessarily come back to the board for a final review. In fact, it's somewhat unusual for that to happen. The operating assumption is that we've been given our marching orders by the board, and it's up to us to fulfill them. And yeah, that's sort of the standard course of action, and I'll leave it at that in case your questions or comments.
Okay, I'd like to move into the recommendation phase of this meeting. And what I'm going to allow is for Nikki to state what it is that she'd like to state for recommendation.
Yes, I know I'm new. Sorry, I know I'm new here, but I was working with the numbers this past weekend, and if I didn't submit it correctly, I apologize ahead of time. But I think that we can do both, save the 3 option, and still provide teacher benefits and staff increases. Additionally, here's my problem with the whole individual staff priorities. We're going with beginning teachers and summer school, which are excellent issues, please don't get me wrong. However, we have a teacher morale problem, and we're saying that we're raising the interim salary. But it doesn't automatically raise those who've been there 10 or 15 years. It doesn't deal with anything with retirees. I'm not sure that's going to help morale by saying if you stay, you get rewarded. It rewards those who re-enter. It doesn't reward those who stay the course. I'm not sure that's the message you want to send. Additionally, this is how I see it. The main issue, as I understand, none of these situations automatically give raises to teachers immediately. Is that correct?
Do you want to answer
Yeah.
the question now? Can I go ahead and answer that?
Yes.
It actually would mean that for the next budget year, teachers, the vast majority of staff, not just teachers, would be experiencing salary
But not
increases.
all?
There's a small number of employees who are on potentially the highest cost health insurance plan that may just break even because of the one-time stipend they're providing. What is, do we have an approximate number of that group? It's under 100, so a small number.
And 200 retirees, correct? Or- I
Um,
think I asked last time, but I wasn't sure.
And there are about 200 retirees. Yeah.
And my main issue is, I think we're rushing this. I think this is a decision I know that you guys have worked hard on. I know I'm new, but I think that this is a major issue. We have 750 family plans and 250 individual plans in Unity, from what I looked at the charts. Those people made those decisions on what is best for their family. I get that. I think my plan and the way it's explained, it's not based solely on the $200. It's if we get 75, then we do one thing. If we get 100, if you look right here, if you get 100, raises 25. You get 125, it goes 50. And it explains out how that it can be paid for. But my main issue is the fact that we're asking our teachers to have given up a lot. And I think that their health care is something that I keep hearing from. For example, this is the small stack, and I have more at home, of emails saying, we need our health insurance, we need Unity. And I worry about those people. And that's part of the reason I drafted the proposal I did. And I thank the board for listening.
Okay, so so it's my understanding then you're not putting a motion on the table?
I do put the motion on the
Okay, you
table.
have to state it.
I would like to amend this healthcare session. I would like to put this motion on the board for a vote on whether this is an alternative plan that is acceptable.
Okay, I'll accept that as a motion to put this plan on the floor. So it would need a second. Okay, the motion failed to get a second, so the motion does not pass.
And may I make one additional? I would also ask to adjourn the healthcare decision for 15 days so we could fulfill and look at absolutely every option before making a final decision.
We're not going to entertain that motion. I guess we would have to entertain it if I'm going to allow it to put it on the floor, I believe. And so we'll have to entertain it. Do we have a second for adjourning this meeting and making the decision later? Seeing none, the motion does not pass.
James? I'm not seconding, just,
Sure.
Nikki, thanks. I appreciate what you're trying to get at, because we're all trying to get at the same thing. We have opportunities over the next month to go back and to get more information, where areas aren't working out, we can fix that.
Okay.
So and as you've heard, there are people on the board that need more information. So I appreciate what you're trying to do. I just can't support it right now.
I understand, and I thank you for your comments. As I said, this is the first time I've ever brought anything forward, so any feedback is... And
as a board member, you always have the right to bring forth motions and voice your opinions on these matters, so we appreciate it. Okay, we're going to continue to move right along here because we have another meeting after this one, so we'll try to do what we can to bring this one to a close. So I'm going to move that the Board of Education approve offering a 2 HMO model to all MMSD employees with group.
I'm looking at the new motions on so there's 4 separate motions.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'll begin again. I move that the Board of Education approve offering a 2 HMO model to all MMSD employees with Group Health Cooperative, GHC, and deemed medical group effective July 1st, 2017.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments at this point? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition?
Nay.
Okay, motion carries 4-1. Okay. I'll also move that the Board of Education reinvest an amount of not less than $1.74 million of the health insurance premium savings into supplemental employee compensation as will be set forth in the preliminary budget.
Second for discussion purposes.
It's been moved and seconded. Questions and comments?
motions 2, 3, and 4 all deal with how this money, these savings that have just been realized are spent. And motion 2 is my favorite out of the out of the 3 of them. I think that we have, from various different points, a number of recommendations for what could be classified as new spending, increased spending in various areas. We have the strategic priorities. Some of the required allowances are actually things that I wouldn't quite qualify as allowances, as required. We have the $600,000 that, according to this here, is the reserve priority spending. We have, and we have these 3 items that are before us tonight. One of which is $1.7 million approximately to go to existing employees. It actually doesn't even say existing employees, but that's been the implication all along. And if we do pass this, I think that those words have to be added, existing employee compensation. An increase in starting salaries for new employees set at $41,000.96. And, what's that?
41,000.
You're right, 41.096, and $800,000 to be structured for increasing summer school salaries with our MMSD teachers going to $20 and our non-MMSD teachers going to $25 and non-MMSD going to $20. And I think that the strategic priorities, these items, none of these are bad things. But they are all new choices to be made. And I understand that particularly the summer school piece, that if we're going to do this, we have to do this right away. I think that everything else, in terms of restructuring pay, I mean, perhaps a restructuring of pay broader than $1.7 million is something that is a priority for this Board of Education. And in which case, this $600,000 for reserve strategic priorities and even the $3.2 million for previously put forth strategic priorities need to be re-examined. And so in this context, I'm not comfortable committing to these priorities without having considered them with the other priorities. With the understanding that, that perhaps the summer school is something that if we want to do it, we got to act now. I realize that with the beginning teacher pay, that the longer we wait on that, the less impact it will have this year. I don't think it's it wasn't identified as a priority in November. It wasn't identified as a priority in December. It wasn't identified as a priority in January. It wasn't identified in a priority as February. And now, come March, suddenly we have to do it. If this had been a priority of the administration, I would have expected it to have been identified in November, December, January, February. It wasn't. In the same way, increasing compensation more generally for our employees was not identified in November, December, January. I don't like things being done this way. And I think that we're doing a disservice to our budgeting and our budget as a whole if we go forward with all 3 of these tonight.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so you're basically calling into question because we're not, make sure I understand, we're not voting on any priority action tonight. We're just voting on so just make sure I get this clear, that we're just voting on the teacher pay, summer school, and the base. So that's what we're voting on tonight. So I just wanted to get clear that that's what you're saying, that.
Yeah, and I'm saying that these belong in the context of the larger priority actions, as in fact the memo we were sent today indicates they do belong in that context.
Okay, all right, okay, just want to make that sure it's clear. Mary, you have one.
Yeah, I consider these to be timely items and brought to us in a very timely fashion, TJ, based on the state budget or the governor's proposal for the state budget. The 12% contribution really changed a lot of things, particularly as we looked at healthcare. And so I think that our staff took the entirety of the picture of, okay, what do we control? And when we talk about this contribution of 12%, it's an enormous lift for our staff. And I applaud Jen and the administration and her staff at looking how we can minimize the impact of this contribution on our staff. And I think that what we are voting on tonight is the options that they came out on how to address this contribution. So I think there's real reasons why this came when it did. I think it very much was a result of that. And so 1.74 million is a way of offsetting those increases or a part of those increases. They have put together a plan that addresses the impact for every one of our staff. It has MTI's endorsements because for a lot of staff, it can be a significant increase, particularly if they are choosing the GHC option. And so that's, I think, has to be on top of mind here. And yeah, I think, I don't think we have been in a position where we could address some of the issues. We had the compensation study. We're certainly looking at those recommendations. I think summer school pay, I mean, when you almost can't even cover the cost of a babysitter when teaching summer school, something's wrong. This gives our staff an opportunity also to have additional money coming in to, again, offset some of those additional costs. And so, and to the point, we want to make sure that we have the best teachers in our classroom. So I think that to not increase summer school pay is a huge mistake from the point of view of our students and from the point of view of our staff. And then lastly, I will comment on the increased teacher pay. Absolutely necessary for this year. No, I'm sure we haven't had this flexibility, we haven't had this opportunity, but we're making decisions that affect our kids and our staff for the next 20 years or 30 years. I want to make sure we are attracting the best teachers to our district. Our students deserve it, our other teachers deserve it, and so if we have this opportunity, I think we need to make it. And in terms of longer-term budget issues, absolutely, TJ, we're on the same sheet of music a lot of times with budget, and that is why I didn't support Nikki's change or motion, because I'm looking long-term, and if we're going to be able to make some of the changes we talk about, whether it's reduced class sizes or some other things, these are heavy lifts, they're big things. We can't spend everything this year. I think we have to be really financially responsible to build up the type of financial strength that we need to have over the long term. Because if you talk about class sizes, we know that just one additional teacher per school is an additional $5 million a year. So we have to, if we want to work towards some of these big goals, I think we have to be very strategic. But I think we're being strategic here, and that's what I appreciate. And not only is it strategic, but I think these are really important to minimizing this impact on our staff's take-home pay.
Thank you, Mary. Anna first, and then Kate.
I had a question in regard to, I just put it down, the supplemental, the 1.74. Is that money being set aside to go towards existing employees?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. That is the simple answer. That is for all employees being put across the salary schedule.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, were you done, Anna?
Yeah.
Okay.
I kind of don't know where to start. I think, for Nikki and I, at least for me, coming in new to what is probably one of the most challenging decisions we will ever make as board members in terms of impacting staff has been really hard. And not nearly as hard as it is going to be for the next couple of months for many people that are shifting off of doctors they've had for a lifetime. So I think I've certainly been struggling a little bit with how to interact with this proposal. And from my take, and I talked a lot about this over the last several months, teacher morale is one of the biggest priorities for our district right now. Who we bring into our district and how they show up to school every day has a massive impact on how our children experience our schools. And I think part of that's around who we bring in as new people, and a lot of that around how we retain and incent and make our existing teachers feel welcomed and valued. And so I didn't support Nikki's proposal. It spent on the equity of the district. It was a cost increase on the cost per plan for most families. It would have resulted in net negative for most families' costs and would have erased the raise, right? So I want to give our staff a raise. I'm not sure this goes far enough. And when I look at this sources and uses, which I very much appreciate, Mike, I love sources and uses charts, there's no reason for the bottom half to be separate from the top half. We, as of 5 minutes ago, have $3 million more in sources. And I don't think that we necessarily need to take our very critical priority target actions, whatever we call them in here, around starting pay and around summer school pay, which I believe we need to do. I don't think those have to come out of the bucket of our healthcare restructure. It's all money. There's no buckets in your budget. And so I guess I might suggest that we do those. We commit to do those. We say they're important. We need to bring in the best teachers possible, the best staff possible for the district. But we could say we're just doing those, right? It doesn't matter where the money comes from. It's not going to matter in the end which bucket Mike pulls it from. And then I guess I might suggest that we commit to do the 127 and we hold the difference that MTI. I mean, I took MTI leadership guidance on this, right? That's what I need to do in terms of understanding what staff are recommending us as a board to do a unified course. And I might suggest that we hold the difference in reserve, and we hold it in reserve for additional employee compensation actions that this group can discuss at a later date. I don't know. We do that at a later date so that we can incorporate it into the existing. We do it in June. Thank you. This is my first time doing this too, but I think we need to commit to doing these targeted actions. But I don't think anything about this tells me we need to take it out of our healthcare restructure. It's coming out of the general bucket of money that this district has, which we are grateful to taxpayers this year have actually positioned as well to have that conversation.
Okay, Mike or Jan, isn't this just really a descriptive way of making people understand? So we really don't have buckets. It's really, I think it's pretty much as Kate described it, and so it's really one bucket of money. And then we can also, if we want to as a board, we can make some other adjustments to the salary schedule down the road. We still have time to do that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so I don't know if you
I'll start, and maybe Mike. I really appreciate your comments, Kate, and I think we're actually more in alignment that it's such a subtle difference, the proposal that we put on the table and what Kate is, I think, proposing. I think the difference is timing of the commitment. We're saying that there is there's timeliness around making the decision on summer school and on beginning teacher pay. That if the board doesn't vote on it now, that we essentially forfeit the benefits of recruitment, et cetera, for the upcoming summer school term and the recruitment season that we're currently in for school next year. So, right, there's a timeliness issue for us. The reason the motion is written the way that it is when it comes to the 1.7, it says, what does it say, James?
Not less than.
Not less than, right? That, we're hoping that signals that, thank you, that's helpful. We're hopeful that that signals the intent is that you've got this money, you've got money that hasn't been allocated to any particular use yet, right? The up to $2 million in that reserve pending where the state budget comes down, plus the 600,000, and plus all the other deliberation that you'll go through, right, TJ, that you've already mentioned about the current priority actions. I mean, the board has all kinds of flexibility actually in the coming months. I think our recommendation to you is that you lock in the I know, what's wrong with me? 7.4, thanks everyone. It's like thank you for your support, everyone. Been a long day. The 1.74 now, but you don't limit yourself there. So I think it's a subtle difference. I think what I hear Kate saying is that she wants to lock in more on the front end. And my recommendation would be not to do that because I think it actually is, I don't think it would be a responsible decision for the board to make. Mike, do you want to add anything to that before it goes back to the board?
I think that my counsel on that would be essentially the same in that a portion of this money that's related to the state budget is, of course, is very tentative. And I think that in past years we've dealt with this. Every other year, essentially, we've dealt with this because the state budget's a 2-year phenomenon. We've had the preliminary budget. We've had late June adjustments to that budget when we knew more. And we've even come back in the fall when we set the levy and made adjustments at that point. So my caution is this meant to be very common sense, which is spend in tandem with money that you know you have, and don't let one get ahead of the other. And so that's kind of where I'm at with it. So I would say you by your vote, you now have a known $3 million that you didn't have 20 minutes ago, and you can act on that. That might not satisfy all of the priorities and wishes of the board. I think your next stop is May, June discussions around priority actions, and maybe some dollars will fall out of that will be redirected. Your next stop after that is the July 1 aid estimate and state budget, and your next stop after that is the enrollment adjustment in September. So you will, this is both the blessing and the curse of our budget, you get a lot of shots at it. It also means it's on the agenda all year long. So again, and bottom line would be just make sure that your commitments move in tandem with your known revenue.
James, can I make one last comment on
Okay,
this?
because we do have another, everyone keep in mind, we do have another meeting after this one.
I know.
So, I always try to think about the entire time frame as we talk. I understand all the stuff is important, so Jan and TJ.
I just want to reiterate that we are all in agreement that we want to do what's best for our employees. We do want them to love coming to work and to improve morale. That's not the issue. For us, it's just about the timing of decision-making, and we want you to support you in doing that in the most responsible way when the timing is right. When we have more information about all the factors driving the budget. And to TJ made a comment about our process and wondered why some of these issues weren't in the initial priority actions list. And I just wanted to remind everyone that we go through a very methodical budget process every year, and the month that we slate for talking about compensation and benefits is March. We did exactly what we put in the calendar from the get-go. We never held anything back. I just need to say that. We have followed our very transparent calendar about budget deliberations from beginning to end. So, I'll just put that out
Thank
there.
you.
One
Mr.
question and 2 or 3 comments, and then maybe an amendment to the motion. So the question is that just, there seems to be, there is this question of, is this separate money? Is it the same money? Is it what's related to what? The connections that are made either implicitly or explicitly, and the connections that people see that might not exist. And so the question is that, kind of in response to Mary's comments, is that if the 12% increase goes through, I have heard numerous guarantees from our administration that at least for this year, no staff member, no current staff member will experience a cut in take-home pay. And so this $3 million does not impact that either way. How this $3 million, whether we use this $3 million or not, will not impact whether the 12% will hit take-home pay. A decrease.
That's, yeah.
By our logic, we're counting on the $1.74 million that we just freed up to really bolster that salary proposal and protect all employees, especially those that are in the fringes, from a potential negative impact from that 12% employee premium contribution.
Yeah, it's necessary.
It's like integral
in order
to the
make
plan.
that guarantee.
It is necessary because I've seen things in writing that imply it's not. That we are committed without this $3 million.
No, we've never said that, TJ, to my knowledge.
It is, I'm going to set that aside for now because that was a clarification question.
Okay, appreciate it.
And just comment on a couple of other things. I think that, in terms of compensation that, and processes, and setting aside money, in some sense, the $3.2 million for priority actions has been set aside and has been built into the budget in ways that we've spent it before we have it, if that's it. And secondarily, we did a summer school budget, and there was no discussion of increased wages at that time. So in terms of processes, that if summer school wages were a priority, we have a summer school budget.
We just didn't have money for it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think that had that been a priority, that would have been the appropriate time to bring it forth. And that said, as I said, motion number 2 is out of these 3 of these is the one that I have, zero problems with setting aside $1.74 million, regardless of its source, for increased compensation for our staff. I would like to offer an amendment to the motion that it currently reads, it is recommended the Board of Education reinvest an amount of not less than $1.74 million. I would leave out of the health insurance premium savings into supplemental employee compensation for current employees, and add for current employees.
Second.
It's been moved in second, so we're open.
Was that clear?
And we're open for discussion here. Let me make sure it's clear for me. So you propose that we take out, can you state that again?
Take out of the health insurance premium savings,
Okay,
because that's pretending that there's a bucket that doesn't exist.
okay,
And then employee compensation for current employee, adding the words for current employees, which is which has been the intent clearly, just to.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
okay, so for current employees is in place of employee compensation?
No, after the words, after. In
After,
addition to.
so in addition to employee compensation?
Into supplemental employee compensation for current employees. So
Okay.
just adding for current employees,
Alright.
those 3 words.
All right. Okay, this, it's been moved and seconded. Any further questions or comments? Okay, so then I'll move that the Board of Education reinvest an amount of not less than
We
1.74.
have to vote on the amendment.
I move,
You can just vote.
pardon?
You can just vote now. It's been moved and seconded. Vote on the amendment.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries 5-0. No, 7-0. Look, you guys are moving in and out. What can I do about it? 7-0. Okay.
That was good.
So, I'm going to keep moving here. I'm going to put this motion on the table, and then we can amend it if necessary.
Well, then we have to pass the main motion.
The one that was just amended.
Yes.
So moved.
It's already been moved. It's just got to call the question.
Just call the vote.
All in favor of passing the main motion, say aye, please.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries 7-0. Okay. Motion number 3. I move that the Board of Education reinvest a portion of the $3 million in health insurance premium savings to increase beginning teacher salaries to $41,096. It's been moved and second. Questions and comments?
Yeah.
Dean.
Deidre, I know that the 300 or so teachers we might hire this year, not all of them are going to be rookies. So I don't want anyone to think that all the teachers we hired are going to come in at 4196. We'll be hiring some experienced teachers coming in at a higher grade level, and that anyone currently under 4196 will bump up to that, or maybe higher because they hit a plateau. So I just wanted that to be public. And also, could you send us last couple of years of how many of the teachers we hired the last couple of years were actual rookies? And as opposed, I know when I got hired, I had 7 years, and that got counted. So I came in at a higher pay level than someone just out of school. And I think, can we do an amendment now to eliminate the next 2 in health insurance premium savings? Because I think you were going to do that anyway. Can we do them both together, or do we do them one at a time? Pardon me?
Let's just do them one at a time.
Okay, well, I'll move that we remove the, say it, TJ. What was it?
Remove
It's the reinvest
a portion
From a
so-
portion to savings.
So the amended motion would read, it is recommended the Board of Education reinvest to increase beginning teacher salaries to 41,096.
Actually, just say, just do the Board of
Education.
Education increase beginning.
Yeah, drop the reinvest, increase, change increase to reinvest. So, yeah, Dean just made that motion.
So let's make sure we have it right, and so Barb needs to have it right. So the motion is that the Board of Education basically reinvest the $3 million.
No.
It is recommended that the Board of Education
Increase.
beginning teacher salaries to 4196.
And leave out the
That's it.
$3 million.
Yeah, leave out all that middle
So
stuff.
we're recommending that the Board of Education increase beginning teacher salaries 41. So is that the motion? Is that the,
Yeah.
okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition?
Okay, that was the amendment.
And the amendment. So, all in favor of the main motion, say aye,
I
please.
actually got some clarification questions.
Okay.
Deirdre, the $41,096, the current number for people that's being raised from is it 37.4? Okay. So, and if it's 37.4, we're talking about 125 people. That would if you look at the difference between the two and and all that.
Yeah, so let me just make sure I understand your question.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the difference between the folks that are currently at 37.4 who would move to the 41 is around that 120.
Something in there. Okay.
Yes,
okay.
that's correct.
And then so everyone who would currently be hired at any number between 37.4 and 41 and $96 will now be hired at $41 and $96. And so there's a classification. Some people, it's like BA plus 6 and
that's
various.
correct.
I'm just trying to figure out what this
Yeah.
proposal actually looks like on the
Yep.
ground.
Yep. Nope, that's right.
And, I like everyone at the table here. I think that the teachers that we hire and the teachers that we retain and are among the most important things we do. I have no qualms about, stating that over and over and over again. I think that it is clear that compensation is part of both attracting and retaining teachers. I also continue to be worried about the second part of that sentence, which is the retaining part. And I think that balance between how we spend our efforts, including our compensation efforts, between attracting and retaining is delicate, and there is no one right answer. But I do fear that this raise, given our current constraints, tips slightly too much towards attracting and leaves less in the pool towards the retention part. So I'm going to offer an amendment. If it doesn't get seconded, it doesn't get seconded. And the amendment is to change $41,096 to $40,096, which would then leave about $125,000 that would be into further budget processes.
Second.
And there's discussion. If not,
Any comments on that motion?
I can just offer, I like where you're going. I think we need to do more around compensation here. I mean, the decision that we just made a few minutes ago takes $1.7 million and uses it to, in part, offset a compensation decrease that will be experienced because of the 12%. So some people will some people will actually just be made whole once, right? Just very few, 100 people in here. Assumedly, some other big swath of people will be essentially net neutral, close to where they are. I don't know what the numbers are. You guys might be able to, within $100 of their current take-home pay. I don't know what that number is. And then there are some people that will experience a raise. Is that inaccurate?
I think that puts rather a dim view on the compensation plan.
It was
Right.
asking a question.
Okay.
You can tell me otherwise.
Well, so I'm, budgetary perspective, there's at least $5.3 million in steps, lanes, and base wage for all funds. All funds, TJ. 5.3 million. It's 4.6 million worth of.
base, right.
Yeah.
Right.
So 5.3 million, and then another 1.7 million was earmarked just a few moments ago. It's $7 million for 4,000 employees. So on average, you're looking at about $1,700 per employee. Now, it is correct. It is true that we have people on some of the fringe areas of our distribution who are going from 1.25% employee premium contribution up to 12 on a family plan, who work only 1,000 hours a year. There are those little pockets of individual employees that we have to address, and we said we would. But don't let that take your attention away from the fact that in aggregate, it's much more positive than saying, well, most people are going to break even. No, on average, $1,700 to the good. Yeah.
And that's helpful. I think there still remains a wage compression issue and a salary scale discussion that isn't going to be had tonight. I would, and maybe this is kind of going back to where I started, I would love to see us reserve or commit to reserving funds to have that conversation. That conversation may not go anywhere. But right now, if you look at our priority actions, there is nowhere we have reserved funds to have that conversation. We're not going to make decisions about it tonight, but I believe that if we as a group think about our priorities as a district, that committing to at least reserve a pool of money to have a conversation about at the appropriate time as part of the appropriate process is to address real issues around wage compression and salary scale is the responsible thing to do And we may at a later point decide that's not what we want to do with that funds when we have all of the priorities lined up. But I think committing to have the conversation without money reserved for it is challenging.
I just want to remind the board that in the original set of potential actions for the 3 million, there was a reserve for the compensation committee. Yeah, it sounds awfully familiar, Kate, because we proposed it. And it fell off the table purposefully because we wanted to be able to do the across-the-board salary increase now as opposed to put something in a reserve. We have a compensation committee that is up and running and has the potential to do great things, and we wanted the compensation committee to drive the work. So I think it's interesting. I mean, you guys actually do have essentially a $2 million reserve now. It's just not labeled as a reserve for something, which is, I think, what your proposal is, to call it something. I don't know where I'm going with this exactly, other than to say that I like the idea that the board is thinking about and investing in future work around compensation to make us even more competitive. I just don't know that earmarking it makes a huge difference at this point. But that's for you guys to decide.
I was just going to agree with Kate. I like the earmarking idea. That way we know where funds are going to go. Jen, you have an excellent point, and I respect that completely. I'm one of those stickler for details where I like things labeled, and I think that would be a good idea.
Can appreciate that. Are you done, Kate? Yeah. Okay. We have an amendment on the floor of $40,000, and it's been seconded.
And $40,096.
$40,096. And it's been seconded. All in favor of TJ's amendment, say aye, please.
Aye.
Can I see a show of hands? Okay. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Motion does not, it fails 4-3. All right. The main motion? All in favor of the main motion, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries 7-0. Okay. All right. I'm going to move that the Board of Education, and if you guys want to do some wordsmithing, but I'll put the motion out there before we wordsmith. Move that the Board of Education reinvest a portion of the $3 million in health insurance premium savings to increase summer school hourly rate to $25 per hour for MMSD staff and $20 per hour for non-MMSD staff.
Second.
It's been moved and second. Questions or comments?
I'll move to remove the a portion of the 3 million healthcare insurance premium savings. I think that's it. It's recommended the Board of Education here's what I'll move. It is recommended that the Board of Education increase summer school hourly rate to $25 per hour for MSD staff and $20 per hour for non-MSD staff. That's, I'm gonna remove that other stuff.
Okay. That's been moved. Do we get a second?
Second.
Okay. Any questions or comments on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay. All in favor of the main motion?
One quick comment on
One
the
quick
main motion. Don't look at me that way, James. Very quick. I just want to say that I went into this very skeptical about the $800,000 and still have a little skepticism. Among the things I did today was call the Sun Prairie School District and learned what they pay their summer school people. And based on that knowledge, I will be voting in favor of this. But I will ask also that this year that we look at the results in both the yields of the type of, not only are these MMSD, non-MMSD teachers, but are we bringing in more experienced teachers? Are we getting specialists for the reading classes? Do we have reading specialists? And that kind of thing, a very thorough kind of reporting on this. And I understand that 1 year is not going to be sufficient, but I think that, going this year, next year, and things like that, I would really appreciate that. So with those two comments, I will be voting in favor.
Appreciate it. All in favor of the main motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries 7-0.
on the floor? Is that possible?
Is this a new motion? Because we're done with our motion. Pardon?
This may be about the reserve. It's just to reserve a set of money that would be guided by, and maybe Dylan can help me with language, but basically, we've got a list of actions here. We've got reserved funds for different actions. I would just like to put a motion on the floor to reserve some funds
Earmarked
earmarked for additional employee compensation actions to be guided by the committee that we have.
We will be having a chance to discuss employee compensations over the next few months, so,
I'd second
so
the
one of the,
motion.
so,
Oh, I can't do that yet, sorry.
so one of the things that we talked about was keeping our flexibility. So once we reserve funds, then we don't have the flexibility. We might want to put more in employee compensation, for example, than you reserve. So, so is this a motion we really need to make?
So from my perspective, it's difficult to guide a committee to create options around a salary scale and addressing some of the wage compression issues that we just created without giving them insight into some funds that may be available for them to use.
Okay, we're going to just take
Point
a
of
couple
order.
questions from Jen and TJ, then we're going to move to the motion, because we really need to get finished here. We have an entire new meeting to deal with. So Jen, yours first, then TJ.
Yeah, you guys know how I feel about locking ourselves in too soon, so I'm not going to repeat myself on that. But I do want to make sure that you know, Kate, that our original thinking about reserving something for the compensation committee was not for recommendations to be implemented immediately for the upcoming year. It was, I mean, that group is underway, but it was really for the next year for them to be working together. I mean, I think the timeline would be impossible to pull something together, have it be quality. So I want to put that out there.
My question is, and I guess for Dylan, is that I believe that as the agenda was written, that we could have dedicated monies that we were allocating already tonight to a purpose, but allocating different monies that were not agended would be problematic in terms of noticing.
Sorry, I just don't have the notice in front of me.
But that would be my question, is whether we can do this as a noticed item. And then the second question is, do we want to do it? But the first is, can we? Because if we can't, then it doesn't matter if we want to. The joys of government.
So the topic noticed for this meeting was healthcare benefits, which is part of the reason the motions were structured to be confined to that specific circle, right? It was a complete circle. So I do think that is kind of beyond what is noticed for the meeting at this point. Because we were talking about one pot of money. I know they don't really live in pots, but we were theoretically.
Appreciate your quick comments, and we probably was a little bit outside of those bounds of health insurance on some of these conversations around budget. So having said that, we'll rein ourselves in at this point, and I'm not even going to call for final comments. I hope you all have gotten final comments in, and I'm going to move adjournment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Let's take 5, or do we want
Yeah.
7?
Yeah.
5 or 7? 5 or 7?
Done.
Whatever. But let's take 5. Let's take 5.
on the presentation that you'll see regarding pathways. But I think it's slide 8. There's a section that says how information was shared with students and families. It gave a time on March 14th to April 9th, elementary middle school families, introduction and future pathways conversation. And then April 6th, engage elementary families through parent-teacher conferences. I have not heard from anyone that these things happen. So if they were supposed to and that didn't get communicated somewhere along the line, or there was supposed to be a handout for elementary teachers to give to families at conferences, I'm just concerned about the ongoing communication challenges. But I've checked across multiple middle and elementary schools and no word on anyone hearing about that. So, and the second thing is just more of a technical thing, but the West High program, or the sample program of study that was laid out, as I plug in some different class options in there, I just wanted to point out that the Project Lead the Way classes are full year classes, whereas this allows for a semester of the pathway required core course. So if once you get a engineering architecture pathway option, those sorry, I thought I looked. Those courses are a year, so I'm just not sure how the model might look with that, and I think that's a Milwaukee School of Engineering curriculum, so I don't know if that can be easily adjusted. So does that just simply minimize the electives, or does it change the whole structure? So probably just more of a technical question, but trying to make sure that this program of study fits all the potential pathways. So that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Carusi, followed by Chris Gomez-Schmidt.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. It is great to see some new faces around the table. When I was running for school board, lots and lots of people asked me questions about pathways, and many were surprised to hear that the Board of Education has never voted on a pathways plan. Pathways is going to be a major disruption of high school as we know it. And unlike the behavior education plan, unlike the special education plan, unlike a bunch of other plans we've passed in the past couple of years, there has been no vote on a discrete pathways plan that has specifics about budget, about evaluation, about how it's going to impact curriculum and current course offerings. And without this kind of a plan available for the public, it's hard to be transparent about pathways. This is going to potentially affect every high school student in our district. To quote tonight's PowerPoint presentation, it has always been a vision to have every student in a pathway. So tonight, I ask you to question the administration about where a detailed plan, public input, and a vote fit into the timeline for pathways implementation. And in the process of developing a plan for pathways, here are some questions that I believe need to be addressed. The first one is, do we have evidence that wall-to-wall pathways will achieve improvement or improve achievement in our high schools? The second one is, how will we be transparent and engage the community in decision-making about the future of high school and the high school experience in Madison, not just about future pathways? The third one, and this is a really big one for me, is what does pathways cost? We know there's $750,000 in the priority actions for next year for pathways, but there is no pathways budget that shows the full cost of this plan, both to get everybody up to speed for pathways and also to implement it year after year, wall to wall in all of our high schools, if that's where we're going. I think taxpayers need to know this. I think the Board of Education needs to know this. And finally, we need to know what specifically we are giving up for pathways. As we move allocations into pathways electives, what courses will go away and what courses will change? For example, looking at the HIV summit, are our English language arts courses going to become more focused on technical writing and technical reading versus literature? It's hard to tell. Will fine arts be sacrificed to make more allocations for pathways electives? As I said before, you, the Board of Education, as well as our families, staff, and our community, deserve a detailed plan for personalized pathways, and the Board of Education should vote on this plan so that it goes through an open and democratic vetting in our community. I encourage you to consider that during tonight's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Gomez-Schmidt, followed by Louisa Kemps.
Hi, everybody. I am also here to talk about Pathways. I am a parent of a Memorial student and 2 younger students who will also be at Memorial eventually. And I just wanted to really encourage you as you discuss Pathways to continue to define a clear process for effectively engaging the MMSD community in the discussion and decision-making process about Pathways. I think what's really challenging about this is that you have current high school students who won't necessarily be affected as this gets implemented, and you have current middle school and elementary families who aren't quite sure even how high school works, maybe, but they're the ones who are really going to be affected by the changes that are potentially going to happen. There is some overlap with people who have current high school students and then also younger students. So I think, I've talked to Jay Affeld about at Memorial about how do we effectively engage families, and it's a really challenging thing to do. And so I'm going to encourage you to discuss and make sure that that's part of the process going forward. Another part is the timeline. The final scope of the Pathways expansion and timeline is supposed to be decided by April of next year. But the year 1 Pathways implementation report isn't due to you until September of 2018. So essentially, the timeline is a little challenging because you're not going to have the initial report from the first year of implementation before you have to make the decision about expanding Pathways. And so I don't know if there's a way to deal with that timeline, but I would like to make sure that the evaluation component and what we learn about Pathways is part of the decision-making process. And then the last part is the evaluation. I am happy to see this beginning to be addressed. I would like to see some more details about it, especially so that the evaluation component is solidified before the actual Pathways starts and we know what we're asking and know what the metrics are. There's a couple of dots that I want to make sure get connected, and one is there's an Office of Civil Rights resolution that has the goal of getting more students from underrepresented groups and addressing the disproportionality issues in AP courses. One of the connecting dots for that is when you start doing Pathways, there's no mention of looking at how many students are enrolling in honors courses, how the earned honors aspect of this, which is also new to Pathways, is going to work. So I would very much like to see that rolled into the evaluation process and those dots connected. So we can really start taking a look beyond the on track to graduate and GPA and some of those other standard metrics and adding in the issues dealing with the excellence gap too. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Louisa, followed by Kristen Nelson.
Hello, my name is Louisa Camps. I'm a mother of a Franklin Elementary first grader and a Hamilton Middle School sixth grader. And first of all, I just would like to thank the district and the board for responding to many of the questions and concerns that parents have had thus far. There have been quite a few modifications to the proposed pathways that we've seen, and these have been noted and appreciated. However, I and many other parents still have many questions and concerns, a few of which I'll highlight here. At the last instruction work group meeting on pathways, the board asked the district to create a survey that was open-ended and non-leading to gauge the interest of the program generally. And what we got instead was a questionnaire which asking us about which pathways we wanted next, not what we thought about the concept. And many parents didn't answer, including those parents of children in younger grades who haven't learned anything yet about pathways at all because they didn't find any fields in which they could express their thoughts as the survey was formulated. So I think we still have left many voices unheard in this process of attaining general information and feedback from the community. It is a concern of many of us that teachers have not been brought into this process, and we hear in many corners that teachers are fearful of losing their jobs. How can teachers, who are a major strength of MMSD, be brought more into the process? Is it possible that only 3% of staff responded to the survey because they couldn't find appropriate fields for themselves to enter their and weigh their own general interest and or questions and ideas about the program? So I hope that we could work more in that direction, and pardon my papers here. Many of us remain concerned about the possibility of rolling out wall-to-wall before a first cohort has graduated, giving the district and board the chance to measure graduation rates and whether or not the program reduces the summer melt phenomenon, which many parents have heard the board describe as the two stated goals of the program. And finally, why must the program be wall-to-wall mandatory for all? Why must all students who are college-bound choose a narrowly focused vocational training program in high school rather than having their eyes open to all different career opportunities? This seems to me like a freedom of education issue, and I think that the idea is that, well, this will do no harm and children will be just fine if they're asked to focus in a field of study they may not have been ready to choose, but I'm not sure we know that, and that that's a guaranteed fact for all children. And so I think we have to leave open space for kids who don't want to choose, aren't ready to choose in this community. And I hope that the district will consider that possibility going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. You had 20 seconds left. Kristen Nelson, followed by Susan Stern.
Thank you. I'm Kristen Nelson. I have kids at Sherman and Shabazz, and I agree with the other Chris's that the board should have a lot of oversight and votes on the Pathways program, but full disclosure, I am a very big fan of this program. The things I hope you keep in it are the team teaching, which we've seen work so well at Sherman, the project-based learning, which we've seen work incredibly at Shabazz, the hands-on experience, which we've experienced in the youth apprenticeship program. Things that I really like that have been added are the embedded honors. I feel like that's a step towards less segregated honors classes in our district. I feel like this is a program that has the possibility to benefit all of the kids in our schools. You've heard me talk about my little sister going through the district, having a completely different experience than my own kids going through the district. And I feel like if something like this had been there for her, she would have had a very different outcome of barely graduating our schools. My concern are with the electives, and that's been brought up. If you're an AVID, you're going to see this in your thing. So AVID is this whole line, and then a world language. The kids in AVID are going to be taking a world language. Colleges are looking for 2 to 4 years now of world language, so that gets all filled up. And then no one gets an elective until their 11th grade year, which I feel like, especially for kids in AVID, is going to be a problem. And I'm wondering if there's flexibility around some of these Pathways electives. Can you do it? Can they get that information for something that's not a required elective? Can you take an art class that does anatomy? Can you take a business class that does a case study in a hospital? Are there ways to build some flexibility in there? My fear is for kids who are in AVID, they're not going to have a break in their day, and without being able, and the music and the arts, you can't then take music. And if you are taking music, that's also a whole year class. So the electives are my one concern, but I feel like, full disclosure, my son's going to be in Pathways next year, so, but I do think it's a good, worthwhile program, but I agree with all the concerns people have raised as well, so thank you.
Thank you. And it appears that Susan did not want to speak, but I will pass around her note and
Thank you.
her registration. All right. As our speakers have noted, the main agenda item tonight is an update on personalized pathways work. But before that, we have an approval of the minutes. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes dated March 6, 2017.
Move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry, advisory vote, Amelia? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-6-0. And I'm not sure what's going on there. We good? Okay. Okay. Now the main agenda item for tonight's meeting is Personalized Pathways Update, and I believe Alex and Lisa and Cindy will be joining us. So, and as I spoke to Alex during the break, we've had one long meeting tonight, and we have a 42-slide PowerPoint, and you can connect the dots.
Forgive me, Mary, wherever you are.
Start on page 10. Go to where all the circles are,
Yeah.
right there. That's 5.
I'm saying no opening comments, so we can get right into it. Go for it, Alex.
Okay, yes, thank you all, and glad to be here this evening with you, and we are going to move quickly to, I think, the most important aspects of our presentation tonight. I do have to just pause for just a sec to thank, again, our anchor partners who are critical to the design, and as we actually move from design planning to implementation, our anchor partners, and as we develop our MOA going into 17-18, I'm looking forward to bringing on UW and Dane County and maybe even Edgewood. So we're excited about those partnerships. I again want to thank Cindy, Andrew's team, and the Pathways team for helping help us to create this presentation, specifically the data from the survey that we collected. And so our outcomes are really focused on providing the board an update on what we've learned from the survey results, as well as providing you some concrete samples that you requested the last time we had a discussion, specifically on the revisions that we made to the program of study, the integrated units, integrated projects, as well as some sample schedules. Then we'd love to get your feedback on the revisions we made to the evaluation plan, as well as the timeline for our scheduling practices improvements. So you've seen these slides before. We primarily keep them in the presentation as a point of information for the community, our pathways definition, our guiding principles. I think that last one is going to be most important tonight as it relates to the access to coursework that integrates as we talk about the program of study. As you know, our pathway system is built upon this vision for our graduates. It was great to see actually a group of 30 teachers at Spring Harbor actually really think about how these knowledge, skills, and dispositions will actually be integrated not only to the advisory, but their instructional core based on 8th grade presentations on their portfolio today. And these are the 5 components of our personalized pathway system. Again, today we're going to focus primarily on the programs of study. And I'm excited that Cindy is here as she begins to get closer to leading this work as we begin to transition from design planning into implementation. And I'm thankful for her work that she's contributed this far. And hopefully we will be able to answer some of the questions that came up tonight from the speakers, which we thank you all for your continuous feedback and pushing us to make sure that we are both transparent and communicative about this work of Pathways.
Good evening. Nikki and Kate, just so you know, I'm Cindy Green. I'm the Executive Director of Curriculum and Instruction, so it's nice to meet you. And next year I'll be taking on a new role, so I'm kind of playing both right now to talk a little bit about personalized pathways as I move into that role next year, but also some key pieces today around curriculum and instruction.
Cindy's new role will be leading secondary programs, which includes pathways.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm going to wear both hats tonight. This first slide is just a reminder of some of the community input that we've engaged in over the last 2 months, starting with our staff engagement that we've had, students and families and community. One of the places where I do want to acknowledge the April 6th, where one of the speakers mentioned engaging elementary families. There were some handouts at parent-teacher conferences, but it was handouts, so there wasn't a formal kind of presentation session. So something for us to look into. And then the other way that we were engaging elementary families was just through the community and family survey that went out.
Yeah, I just want to add one other thing to that, because I think this was the plan that we communicated to the board. Specifically around the elementary, because I know specifically it said conversations, which was the goal. We had to make a decision because we were also in the process of trying to engage elementary families about the Adolescent Learning Project. And we engaged all of our elementary school PTOs or some fashion of a parent group to get feedback on that project. It wasn't doable to actually do both, given that we actually had a community-wide survey and we were providing written materials for parents to leverage. It is not the same as actually having a conversation, but that does not mitigate the fact that we still want to have that conversation with elementary school families so they are learning more about pathways and implications for their children moving forward.
Yeah, the last thing I will just mention is that in the month of May, we're working with all of our middle schools and engaging 6th and 7th grade families through current structures that they have in place, band concerts and some other kind of end of year events. So all of our middle schools are hosting that to start the conversation with 6th and 7th grade families.
So the pathway survey, so we had 3 different surveys that went out. The survey was to gauge the level of interest in each of the proposed pathways, and interest in terms of a high, medium, low, or no interest at all. Also to ask them what pathways were missing, what else might they want to see, and then to gather input on the future of other pathways, so an open-ended question. We had a community survey, a student survey, and then a high school specific survey for our high school staff. Who took the survey? So the results of the survey, we were really excited to see the number of respondents that we had. So from our community survey, we had over 1,300 people respond. For our student survey, over 1,100 student responses. And for the high school specific respondents, we have 334 high school staff that responded. A reminder, when we're thinking about pathways, we take into consideration some initial criteria to consider. So we look at student interest. A lot of times we'll look at senior survey data for students to tell us what they might be interested. School and community readiness, thinking about coursework and other ideas and things that we need to take into consideration for readiness. Labor market, our community partnerships and business partnerships, and also the partnerships that we have with our collegiate and our universities. Those sets of criteria are ones that we use to determine what potential pathways we would consider launching into, which is where these 6 pathways came in from that initial set of criteria. We know that health services is our first pathway that we are going to start in the fall. And then we had 5 other pathways that we were considering based on that initial criteria. These were the first pieces of information that the survey asked for feedback on. So overall, we had pretty balanced with the exception of business and entrepreneurship. Arts and communication, highest interest. Information technology, engineering, architect, and government and public service, all very high as well. Business and entrepreneurship, 24% in terms of high interest. The graphs that you will see is the dark, the bold shows high interest, the lighter color shows no interest. So you'll be able to see the range. Here you see it by respondent group. So from parents all the way down to our students. Staff overall had high interest across the board. Showed pretty much a leveled range. Parents, number 1, 53% was information technology. Students, number 1 in terms of high interest was arts and communication. And then students had no interest, which was even a higher percent than students that had a high interest in business and entrepreneurship. So you'll actually see the bold color and the light color flipped for students in terms of business and entrepreneurship. We also have it broken up by attendance area. So you can see East's number 1 was, in terms of high interest, was arts and communication. You can see information technology for La Follette. Arts and communication also for the West attendance area. And for Memorial, I think that is engineering. Thank you. But what you'll notice across 3 of our 4 high schools is that there were 3 that bubbled up to the top. So the 3 that bubbled up to the top for all of our high schools with the exception of East was information technology, the engineering and architect, and the arts and communication. For our East attendance area, it was a little different. Arts, as I mentioned before, was what bubbled up to the were high interest, and then information technology, and then the third for the East attendance area was government and public service. Across the board, the place where we saw the least interest or no interest, the most no interest, it sounds weird to say, the most no interest was business and entrepreneurship. We saw that in the student survey, and we see that across all attendance areas as well. So in addition to the 5 pathways that the community, the parents, and the students were able to give feedback on, we also asked a question around what's missing. And so this slide obviously is not exhaustive, but this slide shows you trends of what people put in there in terms of what they felt was missing.
Cindy, I think this would be a good place to pause to see if there's any questions
Oh,
or
before?
clarifications
Okay,
at this
I was going to
point.
pause after that, but sure.
Okay, we're close to each other on where to
Yeah,
pause.
yeah.
But this seemed to be a good, and so, first, does anyone have any questions or clarifications up to this point? And Anna?
Yeah, I have a question about slide 12. On the initial survey that went out, the category that had the most interest for African American Latino students was, I believe, social services. I forget what the title was. And I'm just wondering why didn't that make it onto the survey? Because I did the survey, and if you're given those set choices, then you would expect that people would rate those and we would bring those out towards the top. But there were other options that were on the original survey that didn't make it onto this survey. We could go back to that. Yes, it was the senior survey.
Oh, the seniors. Oh, okay.
I guess I'm just questioning because that seemed to be the one that was most popular for a couple of demographic groups that I think this program was being targeted for. But it did bubble up here under the optional ones, social sciences and social work, social justice. But I'm just wondering why that wasn't included.
So I would say that given the feedback that we received last fall, so the 6 that Cindy flashed at the very beginning, remember those weren't the original 6. We added government and public service, and that was based on feedback that also reflects students who would have a specific interest in the domain that you articulated. So remember, these are career clusters, so there's a lot contained within each of these categories. So that specific one would be reflected in government and public services, which is why we added it, as well as expanding arts within the communications. So remember, there was a discussion about how narrow the pathways felt, how people saw them, and so we want to expand. So particularly for students and families who are really looking for more of a liberal arts experience, to actually find students and families could find themselves in these specific pathways.
And that was kind of my other question too, looking at the people who responded. Again, we're seeing a very high percentage of parents coming out of West Side, Memorial West High School, and I'm just concerned that the students in that school may not be being represented by the people who are actually taking the survey, and how are we going to correct that, because it doesn't seem to reflect what the other senior surveys said.
And I would say there's actually more digging to be done on the data. So we just got the data about a couple of weeks ago, and we actually have more questions as well about the number of middle school students and families that completed it and what they were seeing as compared to elementary. I think there's still a significant more digging to be done based on the data that we received.
And I think that Anna's point about demographic differences among them, and also us being conscious about that balance between desiring diversity within pathways and making sure that the needs and desires of demographically distinct groups are met, and that we don't kind of stumble through that as we pick the second pathway. The first pathway, demographics at most of the schools are in most ways relatively near to the demographics of the school, and in a couple places very surprisingly near, actually, and in a couple places a little bit off, but in general, I mean, either we did well, I think we did well, picking the second pathways in terms of socioeconomic balances and racial balances and linguistic balances and ability balances will require, I think, slicing the data along those lines as we pick as part of the process. I think that's kind of one of the concerns I heard from Anna that was there.
And quality advising.
And quality advising.
Yes. And high quality information so parents also are knowing how to engage their child in understanding what all the options are and what they mean, so that they can make, because we really want students to feel empowered to make a good decision about all the options that are before them. So yeah.
Kate?
just to maybe throw one other thing over the fence as you slice and dice the data, I guess I'm curious, what about the slice this way? So if you, I don't know what page number, but the bar charts, right? One way that this could look is that this wasn't a forced ranking, right? The way that it was, the survey was set up. Anyone could select many things they had high interest in and many things they had low interest. So one way to interpret this is that there's, some cohort of kids that's not interested in the model, and another cohort of kids who's maybe interested in lots of the models, right, for lots of subject areas. And I think that might mean different things about how important the subject is versus the kind of experiential curricular structure, and as where we focus our time and you focus your time in terms of kind of, does that thought make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Makes sense.
So it's just an idea as you guys play with it, what shows up there would be interesting to see.
I know Pathways has a tight schedule and it's very structured on individuals with disabilities who have pullouts or special ed. Has that been figured in?
Yes, I think specifically for this first cohort, so every single school met with our student services team and reviewed every single student and their IEP who was in Pathways to ensure that the requirements of their IEP were going to be met. That system won't change to ensure, and that was for our English language learners as well as for our advanced learners, to make sure that if they're receiving services, right, they have to actually receive those same services in the Pathways model.
Thank you.
Cindy? Yeah, I just want to actually, we do need to move forward,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
and in respecting everyone's time, I do want to just, for fellow board members, that Alex asked a really good question when we met about this, and it's on this slide here. And I just think that it's something worth thinking about as we plan out future pathways, which is, he asked me, where do you think liberal arts lives among these choices? And my answer is that it was probably in, I think I said arts and communication. But I think that that's kind of a key question in our perceptions and also in the choices we're offering. And if other people want to have a big discussion of this right now, that's great. Otherwise, I just, that question has me thinking, and I wanted to share it with the other board members.
So I would say one additional thing we talked about when Alex engaged you in that conversation is that depending on what you believe might fall under each one of these pathways, we did not define them in the survey, so they are a little kind of guessing for people. And so to your point, you said, I think it might fall under arts and communications, however, someone else might. So as we spend the next year, which is part of what I think we'll do in terms of figuring out how to get better engagement, to Anna's point from the east side, where we saw maybe lack of, we want to spend the next year is in digging into this data and learning more. TJ, I think that's where a place we'll have to start thinking about, where are we going to define these pathways that we're going to be moving forward with, what will fall under those big umbrellas, and one of those questions will probably be like, where does that liberal arts area fall, or does it fall across all of them? Yep. So thank you for that. Anything else before we go into the next couple slides?
That's that's not how. We can take unfortunately, but we'll talk to you afterwards. Yeah. Sorry.
All right. So as I mentioned, this was the slide where people put in feedback of what they felt was missing. What you'll see on the next two slides are just a couple trends that we pulled out in terms of positive feedback as well as concern feedback. On both ends, with the positive feedback and the concern feedback, these are things that we have actually heard throughout the last 6+ months and when we've been engaging in these conversations, and also areas where we're continuously refining, revising, and improving our efforts as we move forward. I don't think anything in here was surprising, either from the positive end or the concerning end. In addition to that other input, there was kind of a set of common questions that came up. All of these do exist in our large FAQ, but we wanted to just pull a few of them out and answer them again directly for everybody that was looking at it. And one of the speakers alluded to the first question around, will every student have to select our pathway? And again, the answer is it's always been our vision for that, but we'll spend the next year exploring, and we'll look to make that decision next fall, 2018. The rest of the questions outside of those also are on our FAQ document, which is on the website. So a few of the things we noticed, and again, this was our initial review of the data as well, and a few things we noticed is that we need to do some more digging and investigate some of the newly suggested pathways based on the feedback we received, based on the survey data, and also including the STEM. Right now we have 2 pathways kind of delineated that could both fall under a larger STEM umbrella, so that's something we want to investigate. Based on the data, we think we would continue exploring 4 of those 5 pathways: the arts and the communication, information technology, the engineering, and the government and public service. We want to engage in a school-based proposal process, meaning schools can consider a pathway that is unique to their school, to their community, to their context, and they would go through a school application process. We're working on that criteria right now. And the last is we want to better understand and really dig into this idea of the entrepreneurship and business. From the staff, we saw a higher interest than any other area, and so we just want to know a little bit more and think about that one, knowing that that one was in most places at the bottom for high interest.
Yeah, if I could just comment real quick on the school-based option. I know one of the speakers mentioned the need to engage staff more to keep morale high and keep teachers connected to the work, which we fully agree. We did find some feedback on the March 13th, which was the day that most high school teams engaged the entire staff in discussion about pathways, and that was an emerging theme about wanting more time and space for teachers to have a say and provide input. When the school-based option came up, that was where teachers really found both excitement and a place for them to weigh in about how pathways could be shaped within their school, given what they knew about their students and their staff. And so we're going to deeply explore the school-based option. I think some of the things that you saw in the what's missing, I think could be ideas that were generated. And if you remember from the communications plan, next month is where we've actually planned to gather feedback directly from teachers about the specific pathways. Like, which particular pathways would you be interested in? What are the for teachers, what are the school-based options that you think could potentially emerge in your school based on what you know about your students and your community's assets and strengths?
I think Nikki has a question.
I do have a question. Maybe it's from a coach's kid, but my question is the late end time of pathways in athletics and extracurricular activities. Has that been looked into? Because school ends at 4:30 or 4:45, correct?
No, so students in pathways will be following the same, yeah. I mean, I think Cindy mentioned earlier potentially some options about creating 0 or 8 hour periods to extend opportunities for students, but that wouldn't impact students' ability to be a part of athletics.
And while we're interrupted, Anna's got something related.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Anna.
On slide 22, I just wanted to.
Can you, yeah, I don't know, sorry.
Sorry, it is a question about what about a student who wishes to participate in pathway outside of their attendance area? So if I read this correctly, we're saying that we're going to be providing transportation option and students can be moving from their neighborhood high school to a different high school if there's a different pathway that they want to be part of?
Yeah.
I think the answer to that question is if we decide to have different pathways across our 4 high schools, at that time we will then need to make decisions about how students would select another pathway in a different attendance area and what that might mean. I don't think we have done more investigating than that at this point because we right now have not decided if we are having different pathways.
But that would be a decision that would be made before we were drafting the budget and rolling it out.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yes. Thank you.
And just to clarify on that we don't provide transportation. We provide bus passes for all low-income students who live X number of miles away, and then special education students who have haven't written to their IEP. So it's not. So if you're just a non-low-income student who's buying your own bus pass to go to Memorial, then you would buy your own bus pass to go to West if that's the pathway you went to. That would be the assumption I would work under.
Yes, they wouldn't receive specialized
Yeah.
bus services
We will-
because they chose it.
We'll follow the.
That would be,
Yes.
yes, that's the other.
And I think
Yeah.
I'm just thinking more logistics, per se. If you're
Yeah.
Yeah.
on the far north side of Madison and you want to participate in something in the Memorial, you then have to get your bus pass, and that could be an hour and a half, 2-hour bus ride to get to the high
Yes.
school. So,
Right,
right.
but it is a choice, though. Yeah.
Right, but if you wanted
Yeah.
to be in a STEM program and only arts and communications was offered at your school, a family might
Sure.
make that option, or they may just have transportation themselves to take them there.
Right. Just one more comment on that, but that I think is precisely this, why we've been going through the pros and cons of having different pathways at each school. I mean, you just nailed it.
So before we go into the next chunk of the presentation, program of study, we did make copies, sort of placemat size of program of study for all of you. So we'll pass these out, and you can take a look at these as Cindy talks through them.
Making this, no, don't worry. I forgot about that. No, I'm just making it darker because I couldn't see it. I'm used to long ones. My dad, grandpa.
I'm gonna have to see, Ed didn't, we didn't, this didn't have.
So
the-
I'm going to
Mm,
focus
well,
on the
it's-
inside of the pamphlet. I'll explain a little bit about the outside, but I'm going to focus on the inside. And I'm going to highlight two specific areas around the program of study. So since December, when you saw the first program of study, we received a lot of feedback from our teachers, from our staff, from our community, from our families, around what they thought the program of study stated and what they felt was missing from the program of study. So we tried to create more of a brochure or a pamphlet that did a better job articulating what is Pathways, the school's vision and theme, and then in the inside shares their program of study, and then on the back side just talks about our 5 components of Pathways and a little more about integrated learning. So we tried to provide a little more context and a little more detail. On the inside of the program of study that you're looking at right now, this is a sample from West High School. And the sample on West High School shows the shaded green areas for 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, places where students will be cohorted together in their small learning community. So our small learning community is where our students of 120, 125 students will take the same courses together, have that same group of teachers, and really have that wraparound service of a small group of teachers getting to know our students and a set of courses. In addition to that, those students will also have an elective in 9th and 10th grade that is what we call our Pathways Core elective. So an elective that focuses on that theme and that topic of the pathway. So for this one, for example, health services exploration, which is kind of a course where children will learn all about the various roles and everything you could want to know about health services to kind of give them a broad understanding of health services. Sophomore year, this is a major change, well, not major change, but this is a change that we've made since the last time we shared the program of study. The piece of feedback that we got is West, for example, has this really powerful theme about health equity and social justice, and their courses didn't necessarily support that health equity and social justice. So we asked our schools to go back and look at their course guides again and think about other courses. And so you'll notice for 10th grade, students have a choice of body structures and functions, or students that maybe are not interested in the patient care aspect but more of the health equity aspect of health services would take a course called Law and Ethics. Both of these courses are a semester long course, so a half a year course. The other major change that we made into the program of study is to hold tight to 100% purity of the small learning community freshman and sophomore year, meaning kids would take that same set of core courses that are all tied together with that integrated theme. But for 11th and 12th grade, we say that the courses for the Pathways Core are recommended versus required. We believe that about 20% of our students, so 80% would stay in, about 20% of our students may need more flexibility in their schedule and may choose to take a youth options course, may choose to take another elective outside of the health services outside of the health services pathway, and may not want to take one of the choices that they have within the health services. You will notice within those courses, we're also trying to hold on to that theme of health equity, so there's a social issues course that students have the option to take. I'll pause here.
You
Nikki,
just
I know
answered
you.
it.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Literally
Yep.
within 2 seconds, so I should have
Great.
waited. Sorry about that.
The other thing that we tried to do, and I'll show you a little better on the next slide, but the other thing we tried to do is we know all of this will happen through their academic and career planning and their advising with counselors based on where they're going post-secondary, but we wanted the program of study to articulate places where you would have to make considerations as you're going into a 4-year college or university. So this idea of many of our colleges and universities require 4 years of math. So though it's not a specific course here, we wanted to make sure people understood that might be something you need to take, or that most colleges and universities require 2 or more of a world language. And so if that is the case, you might have to take that into consideration when you're thinking about your elective options. So 2 major changes is thinking about additional coursework around the health equity for West and loosening up the Pathways core to a recommended versus required for junior and senior year. I'll go through the next slide and then we'll stop for additional questions. So the next slide articulates a little better a sample student schedule, so a day in the life of a child across 4 years. And this is just a sample student. We chose to think about a student, and I heard it earlier in the public comments, avid student. So we know a student that enters into high school in Avid would want to stay in Avid for 4 years, and that is a year-long course. So what does that look like for a child that is in Avid and also is in the health services pathway? In 9th grade, that would mean that the child takes their 4 core courses, which we know are all required for graduation. They would take a semester of their health science exploration that required Pathways core. Physical education, you need a year and a half to graduate across 3 years, so they would take physical education in 9th grade. And then the last 2, what I would call periods, or the last 2 sections, are where electives come into play. But for this child would choose Avid, so that takes away their 6th period. And then if the student was planning on a 4-year college or university, world language would potentially also come into play. So 2 things to note. That does create limitations because we have a 7-period day. But I also want to note that that is current limitations that we have right now under a 7-period day also. We've had a lot of conversations around what does this mean for our master scheduling and what do we need to take into consideration to think about what how we create more flexible scheduling for our students. If this child also was a music student, right? You can't do Avid, world language, and music, because we know for music you usually need to enter in 9th grade if you want to sustain that. But that child wouldn't be able to do all 3 of those under our current schedules also because of a 7-period day.
Which is for 3 out of the 4 high schools. As you know, the follow
Yeah.
the block schedule concept still remains, but it's just under our
Different graduation requirements, 8 different schedules.
Yeah, if it's okay, I'd love for Cindy to do this next slide. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's just on the same topic of scheduling
Yep.
before
Yep,
you open it
absolutely.
up for questions.
So if we just look across, I'm just going to go to 11 and 12 real quick. 10th grade is very similar to 9th grade with the exception of health. Health is a required course at all 4 of our high schools, and all of them are offering it in 10th grade. So that's the difference between physical education and health, but same structure. 11th and 12th grade is where you do start to see a student's schedule free up a little more because you could potentially think about where that Pathways core course was. If the child was choosing to take something else, that could free up a little bit of the schedule. And senior year is where most students' schedule free up because we only have requirements of 3 years of science and 3 years of math. But again, it's all dependent on what the students' post-secondary plans are, and if post-secondary is a university, then they may take an additional science or math. But you'll see that there's a little bit of a slash where there is considerations for some electives in 11th and 12th grade. What I want to focus on now is that there's two things that we're looking into. We know as a system at our high school, we have to make some changes around our master schedule to create more flexibility. And that's a decision regardless of pathways that we just need to do for our students in order to allow flexibility and open up more options for them. So we have kind of a long-term goal of over the next 2 years engaging in looking at a variety of master schedules, mod system also, TJ. And really looking into what that might mean in terms of what schedule would we adopt over the next few years. But we also want to start exploring a short-term option around looking at a 0 period or an 8th period for our students. Meaning, is there a way to offer physical education, for example, in a before school or an after school option for our students to take that out of the during the day schedule to free that up for an extra course for children to take? I was going there. The other is with the exciting opportunity for summer school teachers to receive a little more pay. We're really hoping to recruit our best and brightest in physical education and health. And in our summer, we offer first-time health and first-time physical education. So another place where we can get our students to come into, if they're interested, take that over the summer, and that also frees up their schedule. So right now we're exploring some of these other ideas to free up a little bit of a child's schedule while at the same time simultaneously working on a long-term plan to have a different master schedule in the next few years.
Bless you.
Bless you.
I got about 3 questions, and I'll hit them all 1, 2, 3, and you can answer however you want.
Okay.
First is that
I'll try.
one of the speakers and also an email this week raised questions about Project Lead the Way's enrollment appropriates, earning credit, a variety of questions about that. So if you can speak to, and I think you're aware of all the questions that have been raised, and I'm trying to remember what the speaker raised.
She said it was a year-long course.
A year-long course,
Yes.
that was the issue. And then
Yes.
there was issues about the appropriateness of credit for whether colleges recognize it as
the
a science credit
accreditation.
and things like that. So that's number 1. Number 2 is...
Do you want me to- can I answer that one?
Sure,
Let
sure.
me
All right.
stand
Well, now I have to remember all
Oh,
3.
sorry.
But no, go ahead.
So Project Lead the Way back in December was on our program of study, and Project Lead the Way is not on our program of study at this moment in time. So it was a decision across our 4 high schools to put that on pause and to revisit that in the future. And so right now it is not part of our program of study.
Second question is that if a proposal, if a proposal comes forth for a 0 hour or a plus hour, when would we see that, and when would that be a proposal for the 2018-19 school year?
So we're actually exploring that for potentially second semester of 17-18 school year. We're looking into it. We talked to our high school principals on Friday, and we just want to see what possibilities are out there. We have a couple different ideas floating in our head, and in addition to trying to recruit for summer school, which I think is our number 1 priority right now. But we are seeing if it might even be possible second semester next year. Yeah.
Okay. The other is that in this chart here, the Pathways courses are linked with and have the symbols for both experiential and integrated learning. And I assume that the integration among the Pathways core course, all the Pathways courses will be there. Does that imply that there will be, that all the courses, including history and will be experiential in nature?
Great question.
Or is that simply just kind of that this is where experiential learning lives in this range?
Yeah, so experiential learning can live in each one of those classes, but it can also live outside of the school day. So we're showing the range of places where it would potentially be, but not necessarily all. I think it'll be dependent on the experiential learning opportunities, what the teachers are focused on in their integrated project, and then the additional opportunities outside of school.
And I have one comment then, Kate,
Okay.
which is that I find it very, very strange that we have a health sciences pathway, and AP biology is outside the pathway. So that's just, and I understand why, but I find it very strange. Kate.
So this is the first chance that we've had to engaged with the program of study, and I know the experiential learning is sort of out of scope for discussion tonight. I guess I was hoping to just get a little bit of insight, and it's really, I mean, the experiential learning aspect of this I find really exciting, and internships and the ability to, get out of the school building and truly get your hands dirty with professionals, right? So I guess I'm curious about the kind of internship path. Maybe that's a process question. I don't know. Maybe that's an actual, how many internships are we finding? I don't even know, I guess, where to go with the question, but whatever is possible to provide an update, just a short one, would be helpful.
Yeah, I would say even more.
Because it's hard to see how it fits.
Yeah. I think even more than an update, I would invite you or Nikki we can actually go into greater depth.
Okay.
Because there's so much not just baked into experiential learning, and given the continuum that Jen's team has designed along with our anchor partners about the full range of experiences that we want students to have. Often people go straight to internships and think that that's what's right.
Yep.
We know that's not going to happen for every kid, but we're going to create the opportunity for students to be able to choose that. And if you think about our definition of pathways, experiential learning is actually wants kids to have experiences both in and outside the classroom. And that's not just limited to the formal ones like internships and job shadows, but actually leveraging the community as a classroom for each of the 4 core content areas. So we can definitely dig into that for both of you for all aspects of pathways, because it's a lot to.
That would be really helpful.
Yeah.
Anna and then Dean.
Yeah, just looking at the schedule as well, or on the slide 26, I think, I was noticing that too, that there is this element of internships and learning outside of the school building, and I didn't really see how that would fit in that schedule. The other thing I don't see is an opportunity for kids that may need a guided study or some time. I mean, this is a pretty robust curriculum, so I'm just concerned where is the time for students that may need to be working within the high schools and how that's going to look. One other concern, I know when this was, or when it's still evolving, but one thing I noticed about the High School Reform Collaborative is that there isn't anybody from the disability community on that work group, and I have some real concerns about that, because looking at this also wouldn't take into account students that may be receiving related services within the school setting, and I also have concerns around whether these course options that you have actually have special education assistants or cross-categorical teachers that have the training and experience level to be supporting kids that may be required by law to have those supports. So I just really encourage you, if you don't have a community member on there, to bring in more staff that can work on the logistics of that, so that we can still make sure this is an option that's accessible for all of our students.
Thank you for that.
Dean?
Yeah, we've had discussions about the benefits of extracurricular activity, particularly in athletics. And this is not a new idea, but Alex, I think I mentioned this to you, that students get and have an option of getting Phi Ed credit for being involved in a sport. They work out every day, which would free up some time in their schedule to maybe take a class instead of a Phi Ed class when they're going to have to work out real hard right after school. So that's an option that I'd like to see you consider for 2 reasons. One, free up some time here, but also many of us want to see more involvement with our students in athletics.
Yeah, agreed. I think although the option remains for students, I think there are still too many parameters or criteria for students who are in athletics to take full advantage of that option that we're also taking a look at. So more students would have that benefit of getting that kind of credit for being a part of a full participant in an athletics club.
Okay, so I'm going to keep us moving. The next part, which is going to be really quick, but what we were asked back in December is to actually see some of these sample integrated projects that teachers would be engaged in. Our 4 high schools are in the process of working on their individual integrated projects across their teacher teams. And as soon as those are in a more fully realized state, we will definitely share those with you. But what we wanted to do is just show you a few samples that we have from other districts to give you a sense of what that would look like. So this first page just shows three different kind of overall units, one around global health, one around Good Eats, and one around a second opinion. You received the entire integrated project for the Global Health Summit. But what I wanted to do was just show a little more detail of what that would look like and how it crosses over multiple disciplines and across courses. So in the green area where you see it calls out key questions and issues, you'll notice that in parentheses it shows the different content areas that might focus on pieces of this project. So you see English language arts, you see biology, you see world geography, which for us would be our history courses. You see the health sciences. So you're seeing how the teachers not only will be having conversations together and planning together, but how students will be making relevancy and connections across their courses through this integrated project. A culminating event for this integrated project is students actually have to really think about the pandemic and put together a proposal around their thoughts for this integrated project. So just a sample, but you have the very thick multi-paged full project in your packet from last week. So before we turn it over to the evaluations and to Lisa, I'll just ask if there's any additional questions around the places I talked about.
A question, what's the next steps on the selection of the second pathway?
So we will be looking into that over the next year. We are going to, as we said, dig into this, continue to engage community, continue to engage our staff, and we'll spend time over the next year. Yeah, in April 2018, we'll look at that.
And remember, April, I think Lisa was going to touch on this at the very end, but April is the point at which we'll share with you our best thinking about how to move forward. Is it one more pathway the next year, maybe more than one? But that final decision won't be made until the fall, after you've had the whole first year implementation evaluation, which is what we're going to go to
Yep.
next.
We're gonna talk about
that right now.
Okay, so I'm going to take the chunk of the presentation around evaluation, but before I go on, I really do just want to welcome Cindy to the secondary team and the work of Pathways. As you can tell, we have really needed to have someone with a depth of understanding around secondary curriculum and instruction, and I'm really happy to have Cindy be leading this work next, actually starting now, I guess, in the transition. So I'm just really honored to be up here with a team that has a great depth of knowledge around secondary, and I hope that we are conveying that we really do take seriously reflection and feedback along the way, and are integrating that into the work that we're doing. So just happy to be up here with these folks at this point. So just want to go a little bit through the evaluation that we have been discussing with you and our thinking to date around the evaluation plan. So this slide really illustrates our thinking about evaluation for Pathways, leveraging 2 different evaluations, each with their own purpose and actually their own teams. So both of these, we believe, provide us with multiple lenses upon which to review and reflect upon development and implementation of Pathways. So that you can see the external evaluation is really about understanding and learning about Pathways through the work of the Joyce Foundation and through the work of the Great Lakes region, of which MMSD is a part. This external evaluation will complement, on the left side, an internal evaluation that will be led by our own RPEO department with a focus on continuous improvement and collaborating with the Wisconsin Evaluation Collaborative moving forward. So working and learning with them and really taking the lead from our internal folks and bridging these 2 evaluations together. So some of the basics around what we believe would be encompassed with the internal evaluation. So the Pathways evaluation will move within our regular evaluation cycle for our major plans, as we have shared with you on our plan document when we discussed that several years ago, I think, at a board retreat. So as we said, it will be conducted by our own research and program evaluation staff on a trajectory and plan that was similar to the tech plan, our Ignite plan. So we will be developing a year one report that we will be sharing with you in the fall of 18, and then a year three evaluation, which will be ready by the fall of 2020. And the design will be put together and executed working with existing administrative data that we have, and also supplemented with new data that we'll talk about tonight as well. And the results will be really looking at results for students in Pathways compared to similar students who are not in Pathways. So we're thinking about some draft evaluation questions in 3 particular areas. So this slide really drafts our initial thinking around an evaluation that looks at implementation, also student outcomes, and then perceptions of staff, students, and family members. So each of those 3 areas, we've listed what we think some important metrics are. We heard from some of our public speakers tonight the desire to also be looking at course offerings in terms of advanced coursework, advanced placement, honors, and our earned honors model that we will be implementing. So be assured that will also be something that we're looking at when it comes to metrics. So those 3 areas we're looking at for our evaluation, and looking to have that full evaluation plan drafted by August of 2017. So TJ, I think I'll stop there before
Well, I was
we
just
head
going to
into
say
the
that
timeline.
we talked a little bit earlier about, that the next scheduled update on Pathways is in December. But I think that in some way, shape, or form, the evaluation draft plan coming back through this committee would be a good idea. And I think that what we have here in terms of what's going to be in a 1-year report, I think that there's a couple. I think that we should probably be looking at the recruiting of the well, we can't actually, and things like that, attrition. Some related things, but this is a good start. But I think that seeing how it all fits together in August before the evaluation data collection starts and things like that would be a good idea. And then the second question is, that was a statement. The other's a question. You labeled the Joyce Foundation evaluation as external. Will they be hiring an external evaluator? Because otherwise, everybody there has they're stakeholders. And that's not an external evaluation.
Yeah, so they have a WCR for their evaluation
Okay.
of all 4 of the regions that are involved in that consortium.
They're funding the evaluation.
So they're funding the evaluation, but
Sorry,
WCR is
they are
the
funding it.
external evaluator.
Yeah.
All right, I wanted to just clarify that.
Joyce
Nikki,
is
you
funding
had
the
something?
That was exactly what you beat me to it.
And Kate, you had something? Oh, I'm sorry, Amaya? I can't.
A couple students just had a couple questions about whether the external evaluation would be following these same parameters, or whether there's any information provided about that. Would we know until we got the report?
It's a good question. I believe they will be similar, but I think they will actually have a lot more, because they're looking at a lot more than we would just for our internal. We have no problem making those available if people need to see them. Yeah. They're also evaluating how the Great Lakes Consortium is actually supporting these 4 regions. So they're not just looking at how MMSD is actually implementing Pathways. They're also evaluating to the degree they're actually able to provide the level of support to ensure that these regions were implementing well.
Thank you. Students just wanted to compare what the different reports would be analyzing.
I think long-term, if you think about a longer-term evaluation, we would certainly want to be looking at things like alignment to strategic framework milestones, students with industry certifications, post-secondary enrollments, persistence rates, post-secondary degree attainment, alignment with anchor partner goals. You won't see that language in our preliminary thoughts around metrics, because those are certainly more longer-term measures that you need more cohorts of students to be investigating that data.
Kate? So I guess along the same lines, I can't tell if this thing is on or not, but can you guys just talk a little bit, not about metrics, but about what your vision for success looks like in kind of simple, and maybe that's 4 years from now, 3 years from now, whatever, that's a midterm and also a nearer term, just kind of simple layman's. What does that look and feel like to you? What is what will to you be great? We did what we were setting out to do. This is a success.
Yeah, so I think for me, I'm thinking back to 2014 when we conducted a 7-month study, and we're sitting around the table with students, and they were telling us very clearly the type of experiences they weren't having, but wanted to have. They were pretty clear about wanting to be engaged in coursework that mattered and was relevant, that they had enough relationships to sustain them through the 4 years. And that they had relationships with their teachers, not just about the relationship themselves, but their relationship around the content, and not being overwhelmed with the transition from 8th to 9th grade. That's not super specific about Pathways, but we think it is. When we think about the community that's created through a Pathways cohort. So it is about significantly influencing and transforming school culture that really doesn't allow students to fall through the cracks, and it's really providing a very clear, strong pathway to college and career, and not just college and career, but seeing how students will be able to interplay with those knowledge, skills, and dispositions that are outlined in our graduate vision, that those actually are coming to life. Kids are actually not just learning about them, they're actually practicing them. And so we're seeing that demonstrated in kids' sense of self, their academic mindset, the ability to think critically about themselves, do their academic and career plans, so that when they do graduate, they are graduating with a plan for success. And that will look very different for various students, but that's realized through these very different learning communities.
So can I just say that back to you to see if if my takeaway from what you just said is accurate?
Sure.
So I just heard 3 big ideas. One is coursework that's relevant and that feels like it matters to kids and that they want to show up for. 2 is relationships, and 3 is a plan leaving secondary school, right? Mm-hmm. Is that close to what success looks like, or what's the? I would say yes. So I guess my question. So I love that. That's helpful for me to just understand what's the goal line. And those are super hard things to measure. And because there's a lot of metrics here, and a lot of them for me don't get at. I mean, we can measure course offerings. It sounds like kind of a lot of work to do that doesn't actually tell us what is coursework that's relevant, relationships, or kind of a what is my, a vision of myself and my future that is successful. And so, and all of those are hard to do after 1 year. And I think we have a responsibility to have a plan that's clear and simple around metrics for whatever you want to call them, leading indicators, whatever, that we can say we're on the right track after 1 year, and that we're doing this, right, coursework that's relevant, whatever, at some N years down the road. And I guess for me, this doesn't quite get there yet. This feels like it's a lot of things we can measure, but I'm not sure it's the things that are the right things to measure to tell us we're on the right track, which maybe is just a long way to say, I think it maybe is worth coming back with what's the 1 year measurement framework look like that really tells us we're doing what we want. And I don't think that's going to be easy to figure out, but I think we can probably take a couple turns on it that might get us closer. Is that? You look confused. Yeah. Is that a not clear statement, what I just said?
It is. It is, and it's clear, and I understand it. I think there are ways we would be able to measure how well we're actually implementing to get there. And through how we measure the school's ability to implement on the specific components of the Pathways model
I
that actually
think
have impact. would
yes,
be-
and for me, this does a very good job measuring how well we're implementing, how well we're doing the input actions.
Mhm.
But I think what I'm looking for more is what's the output? Are we getting the results that we want? And I don't mean results, testing results.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you know.
I get
so-
your point about
okay,
leading
I can
indicators,
stop, but I
Kate.
just-
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's excellent
Yeah.
feedback. I get where you're coming from. And this is just initial thinking, that's why
Yeah,
we're
no, I
here.
know. This is,
Yeah.
I mean, the point of, my understanding of the point of these work groups is to
Yeah,
have,
that's a good
to
feedback.
brainstorm a little bit
Exactly.
about, you know, this kind of thing,
It's-
which is, that's wrong, somebody
It's,
should
no,
tell
it's
me.
perfect. You're,
So-
that's very good feedback. Thank you.
I kind of want to piggyback and say thank you to Kate, and also say that that also points to what we will have at decision points, and that, you know, I think that like most of us, that out of the 3 areas that I identified here and fleshed out and redefined slightly by that exchange, student outcomes are to me the central one. It's nice to know that our staff is professional and can implement well. It's nice to know that, and student outcomes beyond test scores. It's nice, you know, some about student and family and perceptions of pathways. That's more, you know, that's how are you going to go forward with further pathways. But I think that, you know, that in terms of making decisions about pathways, student outcomes are where it's at. Unless the staff pieces tell us that we don't have the capacity to do this, in which case that might be relevant to going forward. So, you know, I think that I continue to have this hesitancy around what will be available in April 18, when there could be a wall-to-wall decision before us. And, you know, and if you put a wall-to-wall decision before us and we reject it and ask for a single pathway expansion or something like that, that's so be it. But I continue to have a hesitancy around that decision being made on that limited information at that point.
TJ, I like the idea of coming back to the board
In
with
August.
another discussion. Yeah, August, September. We'll figure out exactly where that should land before we, you know, get into the school year. I think that makes a ton of sense. We want you to be able to make the best possible decision. So that's great.
A little bit more, right?
I think we're.
I think we're.
I think we're done?
yeah,
We're done?
I think we're just about done. A reminder of the teacher development, the professional development work that has already begun and will carry us through into next year. Cindy and her team have been working very hard with the school-based pathways team and central office support to make sure that we are moving in the right direction.
Okay, final thoughts, comments, questions. Jen?
Just one final thought. I don't know if it was one or possibly more speakers that mentioned this idea of board decision-making and what that looks like in terms of voting. And I think that is a discussion that I'd love to have with the board at our annual organizational meeting in August, which is when we kind of talk about some of those gray areas, what gets voted on and how and what that looks like. Pathways, our general rule about voting on these big plans, districts typically don't vote on these big plans, like, with the exception of a couple that are required by the state, like the tech plan. But we made a decision to have a board-approved plan for the 3 kind of major service areas. I know that that's not necessarily the best way to describe it, but services for English language learners, students with disabilities, advanced learners. And the 2 areas where there's either a policy or a DPI mandate to submit something, the tech plan and the behavior education plan. So that is why those major plans are the major plans that they are. It's also why the approvals on pathways so far have only gone through the budget process. But I mean, the board votes on what the board wants to vote on. And I just say that because it's definitely worth a conversation about what that decision looks like. In April, it's a tentative decision, but it's that following September that is a hard decision that needs to get made by the board. So I'll just leave that there.
This would it. add that decisions have also been made through the budget and especially through consent agenda items on approvals of contracts and partnerships, and there's a series of those, but there's not a lot of clarity with that kind of vote. It's piecemeal. Anyway, that's just.
Can I just add? I
Kate?
just was going to say thank you to
You. Yeah.
these schedules are very helpful to grasp what we're talking about. So, and they don't look simple to put together either in this form or in any form. So just thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you. Just and we have one more agenda item tonight, and it's actually really exciting and important work that is one of our partnerships. And our health and school, Jessica, and we also have actually you should probably introduce yourselves because we have new board members and
Absolutely.
actually new people here.
Yes.
Armando is new, so
All right.
and it was a pleasure to meet the other day.
Hang on, we'll keep this short and sweet. So, good evening. My name is Jess Hankey. I serve as the district's Strategic Partnerships Director, which means that I have the pleasure of working and supporting supporting central office staff, our schools, and community entities to formalize and also monitor partnerships that support the vision of our district and the goals of our schools. Armando?
Yeah. And good evening. My name is Armando Hernandez, and I work with Student Services. I am the Assistant Director for Integrated Health. And my larger role is supporting the mental health continuum of supports in the district, and I provide particular oversight to behavioral health in schools, which is what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Yes. All
And
right.
before you go forward, I just want to flag for both the audience and for the board members that this is an item that will be before the board at the end of the month for a vote on approval, just to clarify around that.
Yes, thank you. So I'm just going to tee things up for Armando to really take off and share out the most important information about the partnership itself. But I wanted to make sure that I took a minute just to provide a grounding in the process, certainly for Kate and Nikki. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes. So when we bring forth a high-intensity partnership, that means it carries forward some unique characteristics, oftentimes serving multiple sites, a large number of students, likely intensive support and contact between our students and our partners, and a significant investment, both in kind and direct, on behalf of the district and our partners themselves. So that level of intensity does require board approval. So that's what we're prepping for in this conversation. And as TJ mentioned, we'll kind of seal that up at the regular meeting at the end of this month. So oftentimes, especially in the case of partnerships that carry budget implications, we try to bring those forth to the board around this time of year so that we can confirm the partnership renewal prior to the budget being approved itself. So that's the case with behavioral health in schools. There are some budget implications, so we wanted to make sure we had that discussion with you this evening. So I'm going to hand it off to Armando to get into the details.
Just one quick add for the new board members in particular. We have 10 high intensity. Nine. We lost one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They're
9
evolving.
high intensity partnerships.
Yes.
Just to put into perspective,
Mhm.
there's a small number of
Yeah.
these large and impactful,
Yes.
we hope, partnerships.
Yes, absolutely. So you'll see more to come in the future.
Yeah, so behavioral health in school is one of the many programs that we have in the district that are really about addressing that multi-tier system of support in the area of mental health. As you know in the materials that some of you that you reviewed, behavioral health in schools, a tier 3 intervention that basically at its core is about integrating mental health clinicians into our schools. I think that element is really quite innovative in this program. It really is about not only putting clinicians in the school, but it's also about looking at redesigning the way that mental health services are delivered. Some of the successes that we have experienced this past year, we have expanded into 2 schools, Leopold and Mendota. This year we have served 76 students, and we have done great progress in clarifying our funding model, and in particular our arrangement with Catholic Charities as one of, it's really our key partner in this process. Some of the areas of improvement that we've identified is to prepare for the expansion into 3 schools in the 2018-19 year. So next year, we're still clarifying our model, looking at evaluation. We're not expanding into any schools, but then the following year, that's our plan to go into 3 more. And we really want to set those new schools up for success in the best way possible. We will, at that point, reassess after that implementation into those 3 schools and really plan to how expansion is going to look like after that. We're continuing to refine our pathway of referrals into the program to basically optimize utilization. And then lastly, we are actively working with one of our other key partners, the School of Social Work, into our evaluation design, wanting to really connect the data. Thank you for approving the data sharing agreement, so that they can look at our own data, connect it with our program data, and really move forward in the most intentional way. 3 final points in terms of this update is that we have combined 2 separate MOAs. The one with Wisconsin Partnership Program, who lives in UW-Madison. They are a program that awarded us a community impact grant of $1 million. We're just finishing, wrapping up year 1, so we have that for another 4 years. That has been a great grant, helps us have a lot more solid footing. So we used to have an MOA for them and then another one with Catholic Charities, and we've combined those into one. We're also are continuing to look at our selections of schools. One of the aspects is that moving forward, we're going to continue working with the community schools program in terms of wanting to offer behavioral health in schools for those schools that are a community school. Basically a way of addressing the mental health needs that those schools are meant to have. However, as we have designed the current funding structure, our funding for behavioral health in school isn't necessarily tied to community school. So just something to keep in mind. But we're also examining our own selection criteria as well, and in collaboration with the community school selection. And then finally, just to reemphasize again that we're continuing to clarify the funding picture for this program. We are looking at different fundraising initiatives, in particular creating ongoing and enhancing our collaboration with the healthcare organizations. They provided some of the seed money for the pilot, and they funded us for 2 years, and we're exploring the possibility of them doing that for another 2. So, open to any questions.
Anna?
On the budget, I'm just looking at the 2017-2019, and it says in the first year is about $100,000 insurance reimbursement, and then the following year it's about $170,000. What insurance is that referencing? Medicaid dollars?
Yeah, so it's so basically we have contract agreements with the 4 major healthcare organizations. So it is a Medicaid. A percentage of the students that utilize our program are connected to Medicaid, but we essentially reimburse the healthcare organization. Most of them are an HMO managed, but we have contracts with each of the healthcare organization agreeing to reimburse for services. So, but it does include that as well, absolutely.
Yeah, so I just wanted to red flag that because of what's going on at the federal level, and we
Correct.
really need to be looking at that, because if the block grant or the per individual comes through, that would be losing most of that funding for that program.
Absolutely, that's a great point.
And just my other question around Catholic Charities, I had this a while ago. So historically, a lot of I should say, some of the groups that are impacted with mental health also tend to be LGBTQ. And so what is our understanding with Catholic Charities? Just because I feel as though the Catholic Church, there are some issues around that. So how does that go out in our schools?
Yeah, so there's a big difference between the Catholic Church and Catholic Charities as an organization, as a nonprofit organization. So they are LGBT affirmative. So the mental health professional basically follow the best practices and standards as to like any other mental health clinician offers in that area.
Thank you. That's the first time I heard that. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is very helpful.
Mhm.
You beat me to the question, actually.
Dean?
Yeah, what
Important.
I've been
Yeah.
thinking about this program is how it links with the BEP staff. And I'm wondering how that can happen, particularly if the 76 or, you said high percentages of students that identify with mental health issues, if they acted out on any of these issues, and if they were referred for behavioral stuff, the link there, does the information follow? And in some, clearly in some cases where if that has happened, it could more than likely be the cause of the event was some breakdown somewhere, and so I'm curious if that link is strong enough yet with our BEP staff and these staff, and are they coordinated in any way?
Yeah, I think they're certainly, I mean, I think there's a lot of work, but I think they are coordinated in the sense that the behavioral health in schools clinician is integrated into the student services staff. So again, they are part of that student services intervention teams. They are considered to be a resource within the school. To be able to offer not only for the treatment that they may offer if a referral is done, but also be available for consultations, both for, again, student services staff and teachers as well. So having that there are an integrated clinician, the hope of this program is that they are available to really have a larger impact than just within those students that they are seeing. Now, in reality, this is a 0.5 clinician. So one of the things that we have been exploring is their capacity to be able to have that larger impact, as we're needing them on the one hand to have an active caseload, seeing enough students so we can make the program sustainable, and also provide that professional development, which is part of the role in there. So again, I think that it does have an impact, but I think that's one of the arenas that we're certainly exploring is how can we maximize that on both ends, and having them be, again, a resource as our schools are responding to the behavioral concerns. So again, I see them as part of that larger continuum, but they're certainly on that tier 3, which is going to reach fewer students than the whole school.
Yeah, I'd like you to think more on that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'd like to hear more on real connections being made, and more of the continuum of the service. The identification is nice, but then that should be able to be translated into actual service that we can give the student at the school, or in the handoff, and everything is smooth and they know what to do with this. And I think that would, I'd like to hear more on that, so if you could think more on that.
Absolutely.
One question and then a couple comments. The question is, reconciling the $75,000 in the memo and the $85,000 in the budget book. Which number are we going with here?
I think we're going certainly. I think the 85 number was accurate. It really just brings down that amount that may be required from the healthcare organizations. So we would be fully covered with the 85,000 as opposed to what we have embedded here in the 75,000.
So can this memo be revised before we vote on it, so that it's at $85,000?
Yep, absolutely.
Then just kind of comment for the new board members and others is that you probably noticed that in the monitoring and evaluation materials of this, that there is the, we will have this data at the end of the year, yet we are kind of making a decision here, and there's always a tension between how these partnerships relate to budget calendars and monitoring and evaluation calendars, and neither solution works for everyone at all times, but there's choices to be made around here, and if you want to expand on how those look from your point of view, Jessica, just slightly, or if not, we can just leave it at that.
Sure. I mean, I'll just speak briefly in terms of navigating and finding balance between recognizing that some of our partnerships carry forward budget implications, wanting to be responsive, ensure that the board can take action on those partnerships prior to the final approval of the budget. Simultaneously, then being challenged by wanting to have year-end data to make those decisions. So, which is why I think TJ's raising it, as his hope would be to have a full year's data in hand. And so what we do ensure that we provide the board with to support partnership renewals is not only the mid-year data, so year-to-date data that we have on hand, but also any annual monitoring reports from previous years. Once we get fully in this 3-year cycle of MOA renewals and evaluation, you'll have 3 years of data to support you moving forward, plus an external evaluation once we're queued up on that actual 3-year schedule. So we're still in a bit of transition moving forward.
And I think as we get, that we should definitely, if we're going to do a 3-year renewal post-evaluation, that should be timed post-evaluation.
Absolutely.
And then the last thing is, that's something that we talked about also when we met last week, was that I understand that the plan from the beginning has been to do incremental growth in this and to get things right and to do it right. I also think that many on the board, in the community, and in our schools, and even in this building, recognize that the unmet mental health needs and behavioral health needs of our families and our students are much, much larger than this program addresses. And so, I just want to say publicly that I am fully in support of of incremental growth in these early phases so that we get it right. But I hope to see planning, especially when we come to that 3-year renewal, that looks at rapid growth at some point, something that truly is commensurate with the needs of our students and families. And so that's my last comment. Kate?
I was maybe going to ask the question in a different way, which was, could we go faster? There is some data in here. I guess I'm not sure what time frame but the data that it is in here shows, improved behavior, improved attendance, positive. I mean, lots of really great stuff, which is fantastic. So I was going to ask, what would it look like if we went faster? It sounds like there's some history to that conversation. So,
yeah, I mean that's great to hear. I think one of the things, as we started with a pilot of 3 schools and then we increased into 2, that we've realized is the complexity of the funding, the reimbursement processes, really attending to the needs of the staff and how they're managing. Again, right now it's a 0.5, so I think we're exploring the question, as TJ mentioned, do we have the right model? Do we need to make any tweaks? Is 0.5 adequate? I think there is emerging consensus that, every single one of those clinicians who happens to be phenomenal, it's working more than the 20 hours a week. So what type of modifications do we need to make, again, in order to make that right? I think the concerns around funding, reimbursements, when we compare to Minnesota, for example, as a model which we looked at, reimbursement is much higher. They get reimbursed for consultation services. We don't. So because this is a partnership, then we want to move sort of aligned with our partners in terms of the mental health agencies. But I think that that's something that we certainly want to look at it, and I agree. We want to scale given the need.
Yeah.
So we'll certainly look at
And there's the
that.
capacity of Catholic Charities.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
And I think in conversations leading up to this, anticipating kind of that keen interest and excitement about growth and expansion, I think the intent is through the evaluation that will be completed over the next 2 years. Next time we come back to the board with an MOA renewal, we would bring forth kind of our vision for that plan for expansion to accompany the MOA itself. So that's my thought.
but we'll take this as feedback
Thank
that
you.
you'd like us to maybe explore with even more tenacity.
yeah,
the possibility
I wouldn't
of
let
going
perfect
faster.
be the enemy of good.
All right.
Agreed.
Good to
Yeah.
hear.
Just-
Good to hear.
Thank you very much. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Advisory vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Done.